Okay, dear colleagues, we are also on the second day of the webinar, and I will moderate this session in the morning. One important acknowledgement or announcement is that we will have the Ukrainian language session that he will speak English. And then we have two scholars speaking Ukrainian, and we have translators, so this would be consecutive translations. So please just don't be nervous. And probably because of this, we will extend this session. So we might go lower in the program to the lunch, but since the lunch is served in boxes, we can have them quickly like that. And without any further ado, I will introduce our first speaker. Methodological. This is nearby. I will read it from the program. He is a literary critic. He is a candidate of philological sciences, senior researcher, associate at Dreamy University, methodologist, cultural manager, journalist, publicist, and blogger. Studied philology at the National University. This school is one of the few in Ukraine which is regarded, which has a high seat. As you heard in the title, National University is called after Ivan Franko. Ivan Franko is a very important figure in our region and in overall Ukraine. And Bogdan is leading the museum, the Ivan Franko Museum. So he is among few probably people in my country who knows Ivan Franko better than I know myself or my wife. And he will give us a lot of interesting insights, I assume, during his presentation. So, Bogdan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Вітаю вас, товариство. Я думаю, що ми недаремно зібралися в цьому дуже особливому місці, у дуже особливому місті говорити на дуже особливу тему.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I think it is for a reason that we are here today in a very special place, in a very special city, to talk about a very special topic.
І я дякую за можливість говорити ту мову, яку багато хто також сприймає як мову особливу.
And I'm also grateful for the opportunity that I have to speak the language that many believe is also very special.
Я дякую за можливість говорити українською, не тільки тому, що це моя рідна мова, але і це мова моєї свободи і моєї гідності. Але маю таке відчуття, що сьогодні це мова свободи і гідності цілої Європи.
And I'm grateful for this opportunity, for being able to speak my native language, which for me is the language of freedom and dignity. But also today, this is also the language of freedom and dignity for the entire Europe.
Дуже важливо, щоб світ сьогодні чув українські голоси. І я спробую зробити сьогодні трохи голоснішим, гучнішим один із цих голосів, власне, голос мого головного героя Івана Франка.
I believe it is critical that today the world can hear the Ukrainian voices in all fields. And today I will try to make the voice of the main protagonist of my lecture to sound loud and clear.
Але це не Франко. Ви пізніше, що там сонечко впало, так? Ось Миколи Романя, з питання якого я хотів би почати свою доповідь.
Well, this is not Franco. I hope you can see clearly, but this is the personality I would like to start my lecture.
Ми говоримо сьогодні в Парижі про ночі, в основному в Центральній Європі, а я хотів би поговорити про українську ніч і почати з цього питання і з його повістки «Майська ніч» або «Утоплена». Чи знаєте ви українську ніч? Ні, ви не знаєте української ночі.
Today we are in Paris and we're going to talk about nights in Central Europe. However, I would like to start talking about the Ukrainian night. And this is the well-known piece of work by Nikolai Gogol. And this is the May Night or the Drunk Maiden piece. And this is the question that he's asking. Do you know the Ukrainian night? But you do not know the Ukrainian night.
Через 100 років після Гоголя ці слова буквально повторить ще один представник передусім російської культури Владимир Маяковський, у якого є вірш, який називається «Долг України», який починається з тих самих рядків. Знаєте ли ви української ночі? Як ви знаєте української ночі?
Some 100 years later, these words will be reiterated by another representative, almost of the Russian culture, Vladimir Mayakovsky, and there is this poem that he has, which is called the Duty to Ukraine, and this is the same question. Do you know the Ukrainian night? No, you do not.
З того часу минуло 100 років, майже. І мені здається, що сьогодні ми на це запитання можемо відповісти так само. Ми не знаємо української ночі.
100 years later, when we are today, I believe we are still not certain about what the Ukrainian night is.
І моя відповідь на питання, чому ми не знаємо української ночі, така: доки не будемо дивитися на українські ночі, українську культуру, крізь призму російської колоніальної оптики, ми не знаємо нічого ні про українські ночі, ні про Україну загалом.
And my answer to that question is as follows. Unless we stop viewing the Ukrainian night and the Ukrainian culture through the lens of the Russian imperial culture, we are not going to comprehend the Ukrainian night.
І сьогодні я хотів би запрезентувати власне увазі інший погляд на українську ніч. Не гоголівський погляд, власне погляд Івана Франка, якого вважають метафорична така фраза український Мойсей австрійської Галичини, він автор поеми Мойсей, який має зовсім інший досвід, оскільки ніколи не жив в Російській імперії і був громадянином Австро-Угорщини.
And today I would like to present to you a different view on all of that topic, different from Gogol's position and perspective. And I'm going to use the position of Ivan Franko, who is very often called the Ukrainian mothers of Austrian Galicia. He has never lived in the Russian Empire. He has lived in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and therefore a different view.
Тобто це буде досвід зовсім інших ночей, інших снів і іншого безсоння.
And this is going to be the experience of very different nights, very different dreams, and very different kind of insomnia.
Кілька слів про те, хто такий Іван Франко. Це, як туди вже вкусно говорив Богдан, дуже важлива фігура в історії української культури і водночас у міжкультурному діалозі. Це поет, це дослідник науковець, це політик, поліглот і полімат. І найголовніше, це конструктор модерної української ідентичності, як ідентичності власне європейської.
And to start with, we need to understand who Franco is. I will tell you a couple of words about this personality, an important figure, a critical figure in the Ukrainian culture and also in the intercultural dialogue. He is a poet, a scholar, a politician, a polyglot, a polymath, and also the designer of the modern European model of Ukrainian identity.
Цей слайд, ця ілюстрація, яка ілюструє цей слайд, це фотографія, це зображення культурного погруддя пам'ятника Франкові у центрі Відня за 5 хвилин від Штефансдому на Подгасе. І це символ української присутності в цьому культурному просторі.
This is the illustration of the picture taken of the bust of Franco, which is placed in Vienna, not far from Podgase, as a symbol of this Ukrainian spirit and Ukrainian identity present.
Наскільки Франко важливий для української культури, демонструють наступні слайди.
The following slides are also going to show the significance of Franco for Ukrainian culture.
І найкращий цей. Це одне з облич української валюти, національної валюти, на грошах просто так не малюють.
And this is one of the faces of Ukrainian national currency. They would depict people on money for a reason.
Так, є багато інших цілей, не буду про це все говорити. Є безліч пам'ятників Франкові в Україні і за кордоном, є безліч сучасних інтерпретацій образу.
And of course, there are very many other illustrations. I'm not going to go into details. Monuments, busts, other representations, and depictions.
Тобто це фігура, яка однаково визнана в рамках класичного консервативного середовища, а є герой масової культури, який рецептований молодим.
So this is both the recognized representative and figure and personality in the conservative canon, and also a well-accepted image in the mass culture and accepted by the youth.
Але чому ми сьогодні про нього говоримо в рамках цієї дискусії? Тому що він для нас сьогодні важливий як поет сну і ночі, як теоретик сонної фантазії і як практик сніння, сновізій, галюцинацій і провіщень, передбачень.
But why would we be talking about him today within the framework of these topics that we are discussing? First of all, why is he the poet of night and dreams? He's also the theorist of the dream fantasy and also the dreamer, the hallucinator, the one who was seeing things.
Недаремно один із найвідоміших віршів Івана Франка, його візитка, яку вивчають в шкільній програмі, називається «Каменярі», це символічна постать каменяра на могилі Івана Франка, починається так: «Я бачив дивний сон», і далі розгортається як сонна візія.
And this is also for a reason that one of the most significant pieces, a poem by Franco, which is also the obligatory part in the school curriculum. And this is the poem that starts with the lines, "I saw a strange dream," and then it continues. And this is the poem which is called the rock fighters. And this is also the image also depicted on his grave. Very characteristic.
Але сьогодні ми говоримо також про Франка як поета війни. І говоримо про як поета війни з огляду на те, що у його творчості тема війни, як філософська категорія і як конкретна історична категорія, займає центральне місце.
And also we're going to talk about Ivan Franko today as a poet of war, because this topic, this is the key, the mainstream line in his philosophy and also in his illustrations and in his works.
Тут є кілька цитат для творчості, я не буду їх голос наводити, всі можуть їх побачити. Але це зображення, це одна з так званих ікон Революції Гідності. Український графік, соціопат, намалював його просто на стіні у час найгарячіший, коли на вулиці Грушевського поруч з Майданом Незалежності горіли не тільки шини, але й полетіли у натовп, власне, пляшки з запалювальною сумішю і так далі.
And this is also the illustration, and there were some quotes, of course, I'm not going to read them out, but this is also the illustration by the sociopath graphic designer who was making it. And this is the symbol of the revolution of dignity in Maidan. And this was made exactly at the time when they started the escalation, and when on that square near Grushevsky Street, they started using the explosives and it went into the heat. And also there is the caption to this illustration, "Our whole life is war."
Важливо також сказати, що Франко, хоча не був вояком, не був офіцером, він тільки відбув спортову службу в Російській армії, він дожив до Першої світової війни, на яку пішли зі зброєю в руках його сини Петро і Тарас, які були вояками Українського легіону Світової.
However, Ivan Franko himself has never been like truly the soldier or the officer. He was only serving in the regular army as a conscript, but he lived to the First World War, and his sons, Petro and Taras, they were engaged in the combat, and they were part of the Legion of the Ukrainian Riflemen.
Тому не дивно, що останні вірші Івана Франка, який помер 1916 року, були про війну.
Therefore, it is no wonder that the last poems by Franko, who died in 1916, they were all about the war.
Чому Франко не тільки поет війни, але й поет ночі? Тому що він, по-перше, належав до хронотипу сили, тобто найкраще йому працювалося саме вночі, ніч була часом його творчої праці, а також тому, що він дуже активно тематизував і поетизував тему ночі у своїй творчості.
So Franko is also the poet of war, but why he is not only the poet of war, but also the poet of night. As a chronotype, he was an owl. He would rather be creating his pieces during the night, overnight. He was most productive during the night.
У його описі є безліч творів, які пов'язані із темою ночі. Найбільш значний із них це цикл «Нічні думи» із маніфестом філософського песимізму твором «Пісня геніїв ночі». Це ціла низка поетичних нічних медитацій. І це дуже цікавий сократичний діалог на склоні віку, розмова вночі, підкреслюю, перед Новим роком дискусатором про те, яке століття приходить на зустріч всьому українському і тільки українському житті.
This theme of the night, it also runs throughout many of his works. And there's also the well-known poetic cycle, Night Thoughts, and they are sort of the manifesto to the philosophical pessimism and the hymn of non-existence, as it says here. In particular, this is the song of the geniuses of the night, and also the Socratic dialogue specifically, which is the conversation at night, and I would like to highlight this, at night before the new year of 1901.
З цього випливає, що Франко в основному вночі не спав. Але попри те, ніч була для нього дуже важливою, і які саме її виявлення можна побачити у Ісламі.
Which implies that he usually wouldn't sleep at night. However, it also highlights the important fact that night was an important concept for him. And we can see the confirmation with this quote and these specific attitudes.
Тобто наголошено на тому, що це не тільки порання, але це час усамітнення, рефлексії, творчості, це час, коли активізуються сили темряви, сили зла, коли назовні виходить несвідоме, і власне тоді він сприймає ніч як символ позабуття, небуття, неіснування, смерті, і як час на сни і візії.
Therefore, for him, it is not only the part of day or part of some time period, but also the symbol of the solitude, of reflection, of creating things when the dark forces and evil forces get activated, when you get in contact with the spirits or demons. And this is also the symbol of death, non-existence, oblivion, when the unconscious things, they come out. This is the symbol of dying, but also this is the time when dreams and visions come up to the surface.
Ну і тепер про сни. В чому своєрідність взагалі ліричного дискурсу Івана Франка? Передусім в тому, що ми маємо справу із ліричним дискурсом полімата, універсала, людина, яка реалізувалася і як поет, і як мислитель, і як науковець.
And now some words about the dreams. This oniric discourse of Franco is also very peculiar because he is the personality who managed to actualize himself as the poet, as a thinker, and as a scientist.
Звідси випливають такі особливості, як синтез і інтерпретації дискурсів, наукового, життєво-практичного, художнього, політичного, епістолярного і так далі. Мультилінгвізм, оскільки Франко був поліглотом, і сни розділилися різними мовами, насамперед українською, польською і німецькою мовами, так, і відсутність єдиного цілісного наративу, йдеться про мультинаративи. І ще останнє зрозуміло, що це сни конкретної людини в історичних обставинах, марковані національні і локальні. Сни галичанина, львів'янина, українця.
And here I highlighted the features, the peculiarities of Franco's oniric discourse. First of all, there is the synthesis and interference of discourses in his case. Also, we talk about the multilingualism of his dreams because he was a polyglot and he would see dreams in different languages, mostly in Ukrainian, Polish, and German. Also, we are talking about another peculiarity when there was no holistic discourse or perception of these narratives. So the multi-narrative nature of his dreams. And obviously, this is also very specific, concrete, historical, context-bound person living in a specific time and place.
Що робив Франко зі снами? Він бачив сни, він пригадував сни, він оповідав сни, він записував сни сам власноручно, він диктував сни, коли в нього через хворобу віднялися руки своїм секретарям, він інтерпретував тлумачив сновидіння, досліджував сновидіння як науковець і трансформував їх у мистецтво.
So what did he do with the dreams? He obviously was seeing the dreams He would recall the dreams, narrate his dreams, also recording his dreams by himself. He was taking them down, dictating, because in the later stages of his life, his hands were numb, and he would dictate them to his secretaries. He would interpret the dreams and also investigate the dreams as a researcher, as a scientist, and transform them into art.
Він робив усе це, і це можна сказати далеко не всі, хто спить, недалеко не про всіх, хто спить і бачить сни.
He was doing all of this about the dreams, and obviously not every person seeing the dream would do this about dreams.
Звідси виглядає цілий корпус текстів, які можна об'єднати в аналітичні тексти Івана Франка. І я буду милосердним і не наводитиму 100 вводів переліку для того, щоб вас не втомити.
And therefore, we're talking about the wholesome entire corpus of text which make up the oniric discourse of Franco, but I will have mercy on you and I will not to be listing all of the 100 or something names of all of the books.
Загалом це близько 100 текстів різних жанрів, автопсихологічні нотатки, спогади, це поетичні твори, прозорі, драматичні, переклади і переспіви, коли він брав твори чужих авторів, у яких також йшлося про них, було це страшенно цікаво, і це врешті наукові праці, фольклористичні і літературознавці, де також він торкався теми становлення.
So these are about 100 pieces, 100 works with the following genres. Also psychographic notes, he would be writing down the memories, the recollections, also diaries, epistolary genre, also the poetic works, the prose works, drama, translations, and the transfusions. He would take any of the pieces of work where dreams would be mentioned, because he was really interested in that topic, and he would try to transfuse them differently. And he was also researching scientifically the dreams as a scholar.
Я згадаю тільки кілька з цих текстів в рамках цієї доповіді. І перший з цих текстів – це його естетично-психологічний трактат і секрети поетичної творчості 1898 року, у якому він вперше в українській традиції порушує питання природи сонної фантазії.
And I will only mention several of the examples out of this corpus, and a very important and a critical piece of his work is his aesthetic and psychological treatise, which is called From the Secret of Poetic Creativity of 1898. And here, for the first time, he's trying to explore into the nature of dreaming, into the nature of dreams as a phenomenon.
Він, звичайно, спирається на дослідження науковців свого часу, таких як Вільгельм, Герман Шайтер, Марк Десуар, Макс Бенедикт і Карл Дюпре, але висуває оригінальну концепцію.
These are the scholars he would certainly be using and be relying on their concept, exploring into their approaches and interpretations, but also on the basis of that he would develop his own concept.
Це досить велика праця, але я тільки сформулюю ключові тези. Це багаторівність психіки, яку називають багаторівністю свідомості. Верхня і нижня свідомість. Нижня свідомість – це, по суті, те, що Фройд називає несвідомість. Це так звана ерективна, глибокова творча сила нижньої свідомості. Це аналогія між поетичною і сонною фантазією, символічний характер сновидій і можливість тлумачення цієї символіки, і дуже діяльний вплив на життєдіяльність людини, того, що вона бачить сам.
This is the lengthy piece of work. It's a long treatise, but I highlighted some of the important statements and conclusions, which are the peculiarities about the concept that he has about the dreams. He's talking about the multi-level phenomenon of dreams. He's talking about the lower and upper consciousness. Lower consciousness is something that Freud would call the unconscious. He's talking about the eruptive creative power of this lower consciousness, as he calls it. He would be talking about the similarity and connection between sleep and poetic fantasies, the symbolic nature of dreams, and also their inherent possibility of interpreting them. And he's also talking about how dreams impact persons' lives and vice versa, how these experiences define the actions.
Франка як поета і естетика найбільше цікавить аналогія між поетичною і сонною фантазією. І він бачить спільний знаменник, власне, у тому, що обидві вони мають несвідомий характер, ілюзії реальності того, що відбувається, чи у тій, чи в мистецькій фантазії, що вони оперують дуже наватальними, пластичними, конкретними образами і керуються принципами легкої асоціації ідей.
And Francois also talks about the similarities and generally comparing the poetic fantasy and the dream fantasy, claiming that they both have the unconscious nature behind them. There is the illusion of reality in both of them. There are plastic images, very tangible, very concrete images behind them, and also talking about the creative associations of both of them.
Кілька текст цитат із цього трактату, ви можете побачити перед собою, не буду їх дублювати українською. Це лише кілька цитат, думаю, що праця достатньо цікава. На жаль, наскільки я знаю, не перекладена досить англійською, хоча в історії психології і естетики вона має приймість.
These are some of the statements from this treatise. I'm not going to quote, you can read and take your time. This treatise is really critical in the history of the aesthetic thought, of the psychological thought. Unfortunately, I'm afraid it's not available in English translation so far.
Це було трошки теорії. Наступне питання, а що снилося самому Франкові?
And then we are done with the theoretical background. And now let's try to understand the question, what would Francois actually see in his dreams?
Якщо сказати дуже коротко, то це 4 речі. Це жінки, собаки, війна і ран.
Completely, these are 4 things that he would see: women, dogs, war, and wounds.
Фройд легко дожитимо через категорію насправді, хоча, напевно, цього буде зараз недостатньо. А я хотів би наголосити на тому, що у Франковій практиці сніння дуже тонка межа між, власне, сновидіннями і галюцинаціями.
Obviously, Freud would find a way to explain and interpret this using the concept of Eros and Thanatos, but maybe that would not be sufficient to explain all of these ideas and the peculiarities of Francois. Because here I would like to highlight that with Francois, there was a really very blurred distinction between dreaming and hallucinating.
Коли якими були його сни, то вони вводилися до 2 основних типів. Це, власне, сни кошмари, сни, які його мучили, так? І, власне, це сни звільнення, сни заспокоєння, де він спочивав душею.
So the 2 major types of the dreams that we can really highlight here, these were the nightmares, the dreams that would torment him, and the releasing dreams where he would eventually find peace.
Коли він був молодим і здоровим, він рідко записував свої сни, і лише зрідка ділився найцікавішими з них у листах до коханих жінок.
As a young man, he would rarely record his dreams. He would only sometimes write about his dreams in the letters to his beloved women.
А от останній період свого життя, коли він захворів на ревматоїдний поліартрит із сильними больовими синдромами, в нього з'явилися проблеми зі сном безсоння, яке перемежовується короткими періодами досить яскравих сновидінь, і тоді почали фіксувати дуже ретельно.
But in the later period of his life as an old man, when he had severe pains because of the arthritis, heavy arthritis that he would develop insomnia, intermittent with the bright episodes of dreams that he would be taking down.
Його недуга мала складний, скомплікований психофізіологічний характер, і тому виявлялася не лише в больовому синдромі, але у численних видіннях на межі сну і галюцинацій.
His disease would be characterized by also very grave and serious psychophysiological symptoms. And in addition to the heavy pain that he experienced and suffered, he would develop some kind of visions or hallucinations. It's something in between the dreams and hallucinations.
Він, попри те, що його вважали тривалий час раціоналістом і позитивістом, цей час пояснює це розмовами з духами. А ті тексти, які виходять з-під його пера або з-під пера секретарів, він називає телеграмами.
He would usually be considered as the rationalist, as the positivist, but in this period of time and in this context, he would explain things as if he would be talking to spirits, to ghosts, and the dreams he would have, and whatever the messages, he would call them the telegrams from the ghosts, from the spirits.
Таких текстів переводиться не аж так багато, тому що він через хворобу мав зневладнені руки, в нього були паралізовані обидві руки, а секретарі, якими намагався це надиктовувати, не завжди розуміли, що він від них хоче.
There are few texts like that pass down to us. Well, because of the disease, his hands were paralyzed, and he dictated the text to his secretaries, but they would hardly ever understand what he meant, so they would not be writing them down. So
Тут лише кілька прикладів в описі, переважно це маргіналі на якихось листках, що потрапляли в ті думки. Де видно почерк Франка, він у лівій руці затискав ручку і фактично кожну літеру виводив окремо.
And these are some of the examples, some of the illustrations of how these writings would look like. He would usually write them on the margins in the books, and he would struggle to take the pen in the left hand and then helping with the other hand to have it really read it and writing down something on it. This is the example of the handwriting.
Більшість цих записів походять з періоду Першої світової війни, і чи той спосіб є символічною проекцією його воєнних переживань.
Most of these texts come from the period of the First World War, and all of these texts, they are like the symbolic projection of his war-related attitudes and ideas and thoughts and feelings.
Основною причиною цих переживань були батьківські переживання, тому що обоє синів Івана Франка воювали зараз. Вони були безпосередньо в зоні бойових дій.
An important part of these concerns expressed in these texts were related with his father's parental feelings for his two sons who were in the combat at that time.
Я попередньо обіцяв, що я не буду настільки жорстоким, щоб розповідати про всі 100 текстів, які походять з поліаритного корпусу Івана Франка.
Remember, I promised to have mercy on you and not to tell you about all of the 100 texts that are part of this Oniric corpus of Ivan Franko.
Але я не казав, не запевняв, не обіцяв, що буду аж настільки милосердним, що не згадаю жодного.
But I never promised that I would have so much mercy that I would not mention any of these.
Тому на кінець, власне, моєї оповіді, як ти зараз докладаєш від досліджень, я хочу розповісти про один сон Івана Франка, який став поезією, став віршем.
So, in conclusion, as a teaser for the possible research that could be done, I will tell you about one text. This is the description of the dream of Franco that was transformed into poetry.
Як і більшість телевізійних текстів Івана Франка, він дуже довго був поза будь-якими його публікаціями, поза його виданням. Ці тексти зберігалися в архіві, їх вважали негідними друку. Просто чимось вторинним, це не до тексти.
As most of the texts related to the dream visions of Franco, these texts were hardly ever published. They were stored in the archives. They were not considered valid texts that are worthy of publication, like secondary.
Це наслідок такої собі, я б сказав, дискримінації ночі людьми дня, чи навіть дивного шовінізму.
I would call it the day-related, day-based chauvinism when the people of the day discriminate the night.
А цей вірш точно є нічним і називається «Чи від, чи сон».
And this poem is certainly related with the night. And this is the title, is The Dream Prophetic.
Немає нічого більшого, ніж переказувати поезію своїми словами, але оскільки немає англійського перекладу станом на цей момент, я дуже коротко розкажу про це.
Maybe this is the worst experience trying to retell the poetry, the poem with your own words, but there is no English translation available, and I will try to give you the content.
Після безсонної ночі, у сні, який межує із галюцинацією, батькові з'являється темний дух його сина.
After the sleepless night, the father sees a sort of a hallucination or vision where the dark spirit of his son comes to visit him.
Він приходить до тата і каже: «Тату, я хочу пісяти».
And he comes to his father and says, Dad, I want to pee.
І в цей же момент провалюється в глибочезну темну яму.
And at that very moment, he would fall down into the big, dark abyss, a hole.
Батько, в якого нагадаю руки паралізовані, ви бачите на цій фотографії, які ці руки, намагається його впіймати.
And the father, and we remember with his paralyzed hands, and this photo shows the condition of his hands very well, he's trying to catch him.
Але не може, і він провалюється ще на один рівень, у ще глибшу яму. Яма в ямі.
But he fails, and he cannot grab him, and he would fall down on the even lower level. This is like the hole in the hole.
Спалах світла і душа, невідомо чия, авторова, героя, каже, апаге діскримен.
And there's a flash of light coming, and then a soul, although we don't know whose soul that is, the protagonist or the other character, the soul would say,
Апаге діскримен. Ми знаємо апаге сатанас, так? Відійди сатано. Апаге діскримен – це багатозначне слово, яке означає біда, лихо, загроза, ризик. Відійди геть. Бідо.
we know this maybe better known phrase apage satanas, which is like a go away the Satan, and here we have this discrimin, which has multiple meanings. This is like the calamity, the bad thing, the evil, the woe.
Цей кейс показує дуже драматичне і навіть трагічне перехрестя сну, ночі і війни.
And this case very vividly shows a very tragic overlapping and cross-section of the dream, of the night, and of the war.
Син Івана Франка Петро не загинув під час Першої світової війни.
Franco's son Petro, he was not killed in combat during the First World War.
Але 1941 року у музеї, який я очолюю, і першим директором, якого був Петро Франко, прийшли співробітники радянських спецслужб.
But in 1941, the Soviet Secret Service officers came to the museum of Franco, and I am the director of this museum now, but Petro Franco, his son, was the first director of that museum at that time.
І сказали, що вони його евакуюють, щоб рятувати від німецької окупації.
They told him they would evacuate him, allegedly to save him from the German occupation.
У цьому будинку залишилися його дружина і двоє жінок, а його самого вивезли до невідомого напрямку.
His wife and his two daughters stayed in the house, and he was taking to the unknown destination.
І за тими документами, які нам доступні, через буквально 2 тижні розстріляли у Києві разом з іншими українськими культурними діячами із дозволу і прямої письмової резолюції Лаврентія Павловича Берії.
But from the documents that are known to us, we learned that 2 weeks later, he was shut down and executed in Kyiv with the direct order in the letter from Lavrentiy Beria.
Ці документи були розсекречені тільки в 2010-х роках абсолютно випадково, тому що російська влада готувала документи з історії Великої Отечественної війни і абсолютно випадково попав цей документ. І так ми довідали з Павла Петра.
These documents were declassified as late as 2010. And there was the situation when the Soviet authorities the Russian authorities were preparing the documents or declassifying the documents about the Great Patriotic War. And it was the random occasional find. This is how we learned about his destiny.
І тільки тоді, коли я тримав в руках копію цієї розшифрованої телеграми із розшифром Берії «Розстріляти», ми отримали відповідь на питання, сформульоване у назві вірша Івана Франка. Чи віщий сон?
So this is exactly at the moment when I was holding in my hands this decoded and decrypted telegram that said literally and verbatim to execute, and there was the signature of Beria, and this is how we learned about his destiny. This is where we can claim we know the answer about the meaning of the title of this poem.
Сон виявився віщим.
This was the dream that came to be prophetic.
І це підтверджує відому Шекспірову фразу із Ромео і Джульєти, що в наших снах часом більше правди, ніж в наших словах.
And this only reiterates the well-known phrase by Shakespeare from Romeo and Juliet that there's much more truth in our dreams than in our words.
І звідси загальний висновок. Всі сплять, всі бачать сни, не всі їх пам'ятають, не всі можуть про них розповісти. Але дехто таки здатний, поети здатні.
And hence the conclusion, like everyone is sleeping, everyone dreams, not everyone can remember the dreams, not everyone is able to tell about them, but few people can, and the poets are capable of this.
І останнє. Ми зібралися в дуже особливому місці особливих ночей і особливих снів. Сподіваюся, вони вам приснилися.
And last but not least, we are here in a very special city, the city of special nights, the city of special dreams. I hope you managed to see the dreams.
Тільки шкода, що ми проводимо цю секцію не вночі.
And I just wish we could have this session during the nighttime.
Але я точно знаю, що не тільки я, і не тільки мої друзі і колеги з України, але всі ми завдячуємо можливістю проводити наукові дискусії в цьому чудовому місці і говорити про сни і ночі, тому що хтось цей час не спить.
But I certainly know this for sure, that my colleagues and my colleagues from Ukraine, you, my colleagues, our counterparts, the researchers, we have this possibility of doing our research, of having this scholarly discussion due to the fact and because somebody is awake and on the alert and not sleeping at this time.
І тому я дуже вдячний організаторам цього семінару, але не хочу не вибачити, що я скажу, що найбільше я вдячний тим, чиє безсоння береже нас із вами сни.
And I'm really grateful to the organizers of this workshop, of this event and this discussion. But I hope you will not take it as a personal offense when I will say that I'm even more grateful to those who secure this possibility for us and who are not sleeping to give us all of these chances.
Дякую за увагу. Слава Україні!
If your attention is boring,
Now, Larry Norman is also a blogger and work on He's a good speaker and he has influence over municipality, which helped us to cross the border peacefully and with ease. Next speaker is Marie Moutier-Duton. Marie Moutier-Duton is graduated from Sorbonne. And she also works at the SEC as a postdoctoral research. She is part of the Visual History and Holocaust project. She's a historian specialized in Holocaust and occupied Soviet Union. In the occupied Soviet Union. For more than 10 years, she worked as a researcher in the Yahakim Ulum Association led by Father Patrick Dubois. As a team leader and interviewer, she made more than 20 research trips to Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Poland, Moldova, and Lithuania, and she will talk about the Holocaust.
Thank you very much. So my presentation today is a continuity of my PhD on the first killings of Jewish people in Eastern Galicia between June 22nd and July 11th, 1941. And my current work on relations between Jews and non-Jews in Bukovina as part of my postdoctoral fellowship at the CLAMS conference. So when Masha Serovich asked me to take part in this workshop, I was very enthusiastic about the theme. It allows me to explore from a new angle the testimonies of neighbors or bystanders collected in Eastern Galicia and Bukovina between 2004 and 2018 during my work with the Yachad Immunum Association directed by Father Patrick Dubois. To do so, I took up the corpus I already constituted, which was used for my PhD, and added to it the interviews gathered during 2 research trips in the Chernivtsi region in 2017. In total, there are 758 testimonies. So first of all, one word about the methodology of collecting those testimonies. The goal of the association Yara Dinonom was to document the Holocaust in occupied Soviet territories and in Poland, so mainly the mass shootings of Jewish people. The team interviews witnesses of the several stages of the killing, from the arrest to the shooting place. So up to now, more than 7,500 people have been interviewed, and more than 2,000 mass graves have been located. So a research trip lasted around 3 weeks in a specific area. Before the trip, we gathered archival material in order to locate the shooting places and to know where our investigation should take place. When the team arrives in a village, we knock on the doors, looking for elderly. When we find someone who was grown up enough during the war, who saw directly an event related to the Holocaust, and of course agrees to talk, we interview him. As the interviews were conducted between 2004 and 2018, most of the witnesses were children, teenagers, and sometimes young adults during the war. The average year of birth was around 1929, so around the age of 12 at the time of the very first killings of their Jewish neighbors. At the time of the interview, they were so quite old. When they had the physical condition to do so, they showed us the places where the crime took place. The former Jewish houses, the road taken by the column of the Jews going to the killing site, of course the mass graves, the Jewish cemetery, the former place of the synagogue, and so on. Every time we took the GPS coordinates of those places. So for this workshop, I went back over these testimonies and paying more attention on their night experiences. According to my memory, I was pretty sure that the night experience they recounted dealt with nightmares and fears. After all, they were children and teenagers at the time and witnessed horrible mass violence, and this was precisely one of the criteria for our selection of witnesses. But as they recounted, the night was not the frightening moment I imagined, full of nightmares and monsters with the help of child's imagination. In fact, for those neighbors, the nights during and following the stages of the extermination of the Jews were not sleeping nights. Definitely, these nights were awakened and active nights, with no place for dreams and introspection. So I asked myself, what experiences of the night do these former children and teenagers report? And consequently, my main question was, what does the theme of night reveal about the difficulties encountered during the interviews and their scientific use? So this presentation will focus on 3 aspects of the night in the temporality of the Holocaust recounted by those former neighbors of the Jews and witness of their killing. So first of all, the night as a setting for clandestine, illegal, and immoral activities. Secondly, the night as a tool for the witness to avoid a question or to justify a supposed lack of knowledge. And finally, I will wonder about dreams, nightmares, and trauma, expressed or not by the interviewed men and women. I remind that this presentation focused on specific territories in Eastern Galicia and in Bukovina. In other regions, like in Belarus, the study will definitely bring different issues as far as the night experience is concerned. So first of all, the night as a setting for clandestine, illegal, and immoral activities. At night, relations between Jews and non-Jews are re-established during the Holocaust, especially in the form of Berter out of the sight of the Germans. So most of the testimonies I went through mentioned the exchange between Jews and non-Jews during the night. For instance, Mikhailo, born in 1923, and 4 friends took advantage of the night to walk from Chertige to Stry in order to barter with the Jews of the ghetto. The walk took over 3 hours during the night and covered some 15 kilometers. He carried a basket with eggs and butter given by the villagers. But as the Germans were blocking the entrance and he had lost his friends, he exchanged the provision with kerosene at home in a home of a woman living nearby, where he spent the night. But the next night was the right one. He knew exactly where to enter the ghetto in the darkness in order to barter with the Jewish inmates. So it's easy to say that the night's actions reveal a desire to conceal what they are doing from the authorities. There are also night visits. For instance, Karina, born in 1929, resident of Mirache, this is a very small village near the town of Orodenka on the banks of the Dniester. And this is in Mirache that some 2,600 Jews, including 1,000 children, were shot on December 4th and 5th, 1941. So Jews from Orodenka, but also from Hungarian part of Transcarpathia. But some of the victims only fell into the pit wounded. And then, after dark, they went to the nearby farms to ask for food and clothing. There is another disturbing testimony from Mirache. Another resident, Anna, born in 1925, reports that 2 Jews came to her house, wounded and naked. According to her, she gave them bread and milk, but they refused to take clothes. This is very, very weird. Another Mirache resident, born in 1999, took in a Jewish woman and brought her back to Orodenka the following morning, at her request, according to him. And we know nothing about the interaction between this woman and this man. So asking the witness about the events of which he was an actor during the night can quickly weaken the interview, because the night also consists immoral actions which cannot be questioned at the risk of weakening the bonds between the interviewee and bringing the testimony to an halt, to a stop. The interviewer is regularly faced with a choice to ask questions like not directly incriminating question, or to ask more directly, did the Jewish woman ask you for something to eat? Did she have any clothes? And so on. Naturally, asking what happened to the Jewish woman in his home was, of course, out of the question. At this point in the interview, it was a question of prioritizing. So the man was very old, 98. The interview couldn't last long, so we had to make a choice, taking into account the age of the witness and his reluctance to talk to us because he didn't want, for instance, to give us his name. And we also knew that he had visited the site, the killing site, after the shootings. And we were very keen to hear what he had to say on the topic, as the evidence gathered up to that point needing to be clarified, particularly as regards the location of the pits and the presence of many neighbors at the site after the shooting. Indeed, at dusk of the next day, he went to the killing site, and while clearing some snow, he managed to recover some clothes, including women's underwear, and find in it some robbers. Elsewhere, and not only in Mirache, the visit of the pits took place at night after the shooting. For example, Vassil, born in 1932 and resident of Sheparivtsi, so the main killing site near Colombia, went to the killing site at night, but found only closed mass graves. But he was not alone there. Many people went to the place, and it was really a matter of simple curiosity. Another example, Petro, born in 1932, from the hamlet of Yamna. Him and his father waited until the nightfall to dig up the bodies of two Ukrainian women killed apparently by mistake with the Jews of Yaremchi, 7 kilometers from their home. So they loaded the two bodies into the cart and secretly buried the two women in the Christian cemetery. So the night was the time where the local population could act behind the back of the German occupants. But the night is also the perfect time to build a narrative without incrimination, and this is my second point. The sentence, "It happened at night," is a regular feature of testimonies. It plunges an action into obscurity and discourages any questions. We didn't see, we didn't know, because it happened at night. Above all, we don't know who is involved. This sentence implies that darkness prevents all knowledge, and that at night you are all asleep. And yet, as we explore the many testimonies, there are plenty of people out and about on the nights before or after the crime, or even on the night when the crimes take place. For instance, Emilia, born in 1923, was interviewed in 2005 in Svidova, in Ternopil region. Question: were there Jews in the village before the war? Answer: yes, there were 3 Jewish families next to the church and another one further down. And question: what happened to them? Answer: they went to stay with relatives. And in one night, the Jews had disappeared without a trace, in silence. And like the next morning, they were simply gone. But we know from the Topste Iskorburg that the Jews of Svidova were killed by the local Ukrainians in late June, early July 1941, before the Germans arrived, so during the pogrom. Another example, Vasiliena, born in 1930, a resident of Yablunitsa, so near in the Carpathian region, says, and I quote, "The Jews lived at the end of the village of Yablunitsa. There were only Jewish houses there. They lived in harmony with other villagers, like a family. The Germans arrived during the night. They put all the Jews in trucks and took them somewhere, we don't know where. They were all taken away that night. I didn't see it. It all happened during the night. They were driven out of their houses without taking anything. All their belongings were left there. It was the head of the rural council who took care of their belongings. The Jews are more means, they are good furnitures. The head of the rural council gave me a wardrobe, a bed, and a night table." End of the quote. She says she worked for the head of the rural council, cleaning and things like that. But she was born in 1930. So, was her date of birth a lie, or did she get the furniture in a different way? Difficult to say. Night, that this gives identity also. And in Nizhny Starlitzy, the pogrom takes place at night. Locals kill the Jews from the village below Ophir on 2 consecutive nights. Meanwhile, again at night, the villagers looted the Jewish home, taken away their clothes and furniture. The yard of Veronica's grandfather, Veronica was born in 1934, was used to gather these belongings during the night. And because the yard was between the Jewish and the Ukrainian area of the village. And the next morning, everything was gone. There are many reports of looting of Jewish homes at night after the shooting, as in Sinkiv near Zalichiki or in Buchach, where young boys from the village stole furniture, valuables, and clothes from Jewish homes at nightfall with carts, and then sold them on the market, and people from other villages bought them. But these young boys were never named in the testimonies, and their identities fades into the night. The idea emerged that the night would exonerate, but would dilute the responsibility. Such is the case in testimonies recorded in Vishnivets, where the pit was dug by local peasants at night. As in the night, numbed the senses and the faculty of judgment and knowledge. That what happened at night was out of record. Interviewing at night raises fundamental questions about the interview methodology. And this particular space of time, off-screen and opaque, is the time for the most illegal and clandestine actions and activities. And perhaps this is also the time when people who meet at night cannot judge each other, united in the same illegal activity that compels complicity. And then my third point, what about the nightmares, the trauma? I was sure I heard these people talk about their nightmares so often. But yet I could not find traces of them in the recorded interviews, and not in the very detailed accounts that we wrote during the research trip. But how could I misunderstood like that? And then I finally understood. This confidence about nightmares and bad dreams took place after the interview with those people, on the doorstep, on the way out of the house. But unfortunately, only my memory knows these stories. In fact, the nightmare these people were referring to were not the ones they had during the Nazi occupation, but the ones they were going to have after giving their testimony. And I remember this old lady in Kalush. She was gently shaking her head as we left, and she was worried about the night she was going to spend, and kept saying, I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm not going to sleep tonight. Another man, Volodymyr, also lived near Orodenka. Colleagues from our team had made an appointment with him the day before the following day. When we arrived at his home, he was waiting for us impatiently. He was in a state of great agitation. He hadn't slept at night, thinking about all the things he had to tell us, and had gotten up during the night to scribe notice on a piece of paper so as not to forget what he wanted to say to us. You can see him then when we were on the this man here. Investigations often lasted 2 or 3 days, the time it took to interview each witness in one place. We would often come across someone who had been interviewed the day before and who would confess to not having slept because of the horrific images they had come back to their minds after the interview. Or their nightmares, believing that they heard gunfire. Still others had their blood pressure checked because they were too agitated after their testimony. As far as possible, we asked if any family members came to see them and if they were not too isolated. And if it was the case, one of the team members would drop by to check up on them the next day. Unfortunately, this nocturnal tournaments have no records. They reveal visions that still vivid, haunting the witnesses we met. And since dreams and sleepless nights are the theme of this workshop, I'd like to add that members, you can see, of the team, you can see here, or here when we are, it was in Mirache, so near the killing site of December 1941. So I'd like to add that team members used to complain at breakfast about terrible nightmares. And I was surprised when I reread my travel diaries for this workshop to realize how badly I had slept, invaded by images of massacre reconstructed from the testimonies I heard during the day, and also shaped by being on the spot on the edge of the horror mass graves. And moreover, we have learned, for instance, that our hotel in Strie was located along the mass graves. In conclusion, the sleepless nights of the Shoah's neighbors at the time of the events were mostly filled with illegal and immoral activities, battering, looting, blackmail. And the theme of the night highlights the difficulties of interviewing these activities in details. It is also a way for interviewees to avoid revealing some points, covering up a crime, a pogrom, concealing an identity, remaining vague. And while the question of the impact of the massacre they witnessed is not given much prominence during the interview, it is clearly still considerable 80 years later. Most witnesses provide detailed, precise images of the shootings. For example, as if the scene was still unfolding before their eyes. And these descriptions, the fruit of a long process of memorization in which personal memories are fed and distorted by collective memory and the passage of time. These images are strong enough to have an impact on the members of the team in charge of collecting these accounts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Indeed, it's very important. I was not really thinking about the influence of nightmares on those who take interviews, and that we need to think about this. We normally consider ourselves as instruments, like without no souls, but instrument have also. Sorry, please. We have the last, but not least, presenter today. Oksana Kuzmenko is acknowledged ethnographer in Ukraine. Oksana Kuzmenko is the head of the Department of Social Anthropology at the Institute of Technology of Ukrainian Academy of Science. And she's well known for her studies of war folklore. So she does a lot of studying the First World War, Second World War, and the current war, folk songs, and many other things. She published extensively. She is the author of 3 monographs and many articles. She also published a text on the famous song for Червона Калина, which was sang by a Ukrainian and what's probably not Ukrainian singers. It became kind of a worldwide hit for some period, and Oksana knows everything about the song. So if you are interested, you're the correct person to consult. And we will have this presentation in Ukrainian, this consecutive translation of Svetlana Bregman, for which we're very much thankful. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your attention. Я буду говорити українською мовою, бо українська мова мало присутня у цьому середовищі в цій частині Європи, але буде щоразу більше.
I'm going to speak Ukrainian because Ukrainian language is not sufficiently represented in this context and also in this environment and in this part of the world, and I think it should resound more frequently.
Я сьогодні в кращому положенні, бо слухаючи другий день доповіді шановних колег, я можу доповнити свою презентацію пов'язаністю з тим, що кожен з вас говорив.
I'm in a better position today than many others who spoke yesterday. I was listening to you yesterday and this morning, and I could add many more aspects and nuances to my presentation.
Більше того, 30 років вивчаючи воєнний фольклор теренів Галичини, я тепер розумію, наскільки важливо кожний фрагмент, кожна тематична група пов'язана із цим періодом кривавого ХХ століття, як сказав Тімоті Снайдер.
After 30 years of researching and exploring into the war folklore of this part of the world, which is Galicia, I realize how the thematic groups, how the important topics are related and interrelated as an intrinsic part of this bloody 21st century, as Timothy Snyder put it.
Для мене воєнний фольклор – це був 20-25 років об'єктом дослідження, але, на жаль, другий рік я розумію, що я сама стаю об'єктом дослідження.
This war folklore has been the subject of my research for some 20 or 25 years, but unfortunately, regretfully, I admit that over the past 2 years, I am becoming the object of research.
Тому метод включеного спостереження, він стає щоденним і щохвилинним.
Therefore, this method of inclusive and integral observation, this is becoming the daily work, the routine for me.
І це визначило тему мого дослідження і презентацію, яку хочу поділитися з вами.
And this experience and these facts, they also prompted the topic of my research and the topic of this presentation that I would be happy to share with you.
Отже, важко сказати. 9 березня 2022 року у моєму домі опинилася жінка з Харкова.
So I'm trying to bring back those memories of those days now. It was March 9th, 2022, when this lady from Kharkiv came to my home.
Вона була в жахливому стані психологічному.
She had a horrible psychological condition.
Перше, що вона зробила, коли впала на диван, вона почала розповідати про сон.
And the first thing she did when she came in and she just landed on the sofa, she would start telling about her dream.
Відтоді, від того дня і по сьогоднішній день я з нею постійно спілкуюся.
Since that moment and until this day, I have been in close contact with her.
Коли я їхала до Парижу і казала, що твій сон визначив мою перспективу наукову, вона мені сказала вперше: добре, що я його тоді розказала, бо я не знаю, що б з мною трапилося психологічно.
When I was telling her that I was going to Paris and that her dream, it defined my topic of research and my presentation, she would reply, I'm happy that I shared this dream with you, because otherwise I don't know what would have happened to me in terms of the mental state.
Ви маєте можливість побачити фрагмент цього сну, тобто оніричного наративу.
Here we can see the fragment of this dream, like the fragment of this oniric narrative,
який став комунікативною подією, як це означає Барбара Тедлок.
which has become the communicative event, as Barbara Tadlock would term it.
І я зрозуміла, як фольклорист, що цей наратив містить дуже традиційні образи, які я вже неодноразово читала і чула.
And I realized that this narrative, it incorporates and includes very typical and common images that I have come across multiple times. I have read about them and I've heard about them.
Отже, я бачила сюжет і я бачила образи. І ці образи дуже чітко групувалися в категорії.
I could distinguish the plot, I could distinguish the images that could be grouped into very distinct categories.
Це зробив Artificial Intelligence, мені згрупував і показав, але я здивувалася, як влучно.
This is what artificial intelligence did about these images. It grouped and categorized them. And I was really surprised to see how precise and apt this classification came out.
Бо тому що там, де йдеться про групу птахів, є і знак сови.
Because there was this group of the flock of birds and there was this illustration that the AI selected of an owl.
І сова є одним із знакових образів оніричних наративів цієї війни.
And actually, the owl is one of the key images of the oniric narratives of this war and generally of the narratives.
Я не знаю, чи це випадковість, чи в цьому відображається оця традиційність, яка має міфолого-фольклорне підґрунтя.
I'm not sure whether this is the random choice that I made, or maybe this is the outcome of this traditional, conventional perception of the oniric narratives per se.
І тут ми вчора згадували і слухали доповідь про Рейнгарда Козелика, і я відштовхувалась від його тези.
Yesterday, Reinhard Kozelek was also mentioned during the presentation, and I was actually using his quote as the basis for my narration.
І, власне, сни допомагають зрозуміти нашу реальність, те, що ми чуємо вже сьогодні, не раз.
Which is to say that the dreams actually help us sometimes understand our reality, and we have heard it multiple times.
Там є згадка про те, що є цілий проект Богдана Шумиловича, але значно раніше, від 2014 року, віщі сни періодично функціонували в мас-медійному просторі.
This slide also mentions a project run by Bogdan Shumilovich, but it all started much earlier. Since 2014, the prophetic dreams, they would be coming out here and there in the media space.
Отже, джерело мого дослідження сьогоднішнього і тих висновків, які ви почуєте, є записи мої особисті 50 сюжетів, віщих снів.
So the source for my research and for the conclusions that I'm going to present to you, these are the 50 plots that I recorded.
Переважна більшість жінки, і це зрозуміло.
Mostly these are the stories, the dreams shared by women, which is obvious.
Два тільки наративи записані від чоловіків, і про один із тих снів я вам скажу, бо він дуже особливий. Це є віщий сон на перемогу.
Two of these stories were recorded from listening to men. And I'm going to tell you in detail about one of them because this is the prophetic dream for the victory.
Отже, я буду говорити про основний аргумент, про що оніричні наративи – це особлива мова.
So my key statement today would be that the oniric narratives, this is the special language.
І ця мова є особлива у цій царині, в якій я працюю, це фольклористика. Ви маєте можливість подивитися тільки кілька референсів, але традиція дуже докладного вивчення оніричних наративів і оніричної парадигми, бо це не тільки наративи, починається з 90-х років.
And this is the special language, also especially for the area where I have been working and researching for so many years. This is the folklore studies. Here's to illustrate at least some of the references about the research that has become more extensive about the oniric narratives in folklore studies since 1990s.
Як правило, оніричні традиції, усні оніричні традиції дуже глибокі, фінські традиції, польські, російські, українські, білоруські.
Usually, there is a very rich oral oniric tradition, oniric narrative tradition in the Finnish folklore, in the Polish and Russian folklore.
Ключовими поняттями, які важливі для культуристики і які дають можливість зрозуміти, який предмет вивчення, це те, що є сон і його переказ, і є його тлумачення. Це є структурно дві важливі частини, які можуть відрізнятися суттєво.
The key concepts to understand about researching the dreams is the dream includes two important elements. They are inherent elements and they are instrumental to understanding this concept. This is the telling about the dream, the narration of the dream, and interpretation of the dream.
Я хочу сказати, що моя сьогоднішня виступ тут на цьому круглому столі як культуристки, це є своєрідне повернення. Тому що ми вже мали співпрацю. Ви бачите Катерину Грушевську, як етнолог і антрополог. У 1925 році вона була в Парижі.
I would like to say that my presentation here today at this table is sort of a return because me as the folklore researcher, this is like the reiteration of something that already happened in 1925. This is Katarina Gruszewska, who came here to Paris also to speak in 1925.
Як дочка першого президента Української Народної Республіки, вона налагоджувала широкі зв'язки з зарубіжними дослідниками, в тому числі з Королівським антропологічним інститутом Великої Британії та Ірландії, з яким вирішили працювати, власне, за напрямком запису сновидінь.
She was the daughter of the first president of the Ukrainian People's Republic, and she was a researcher, a scholar, and she was trying to be active in establishing relations and cooperation with the international researchers. In particular, there was the agreement with the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland to continue the track of research, specifically focusing on the recording of dreams.
Вона є авторкою питальника, квестіонаріуша, за яким була розгорнута велика програма, і на сьогоднішній день відомо, що було листування з академічними громадами Британії у цьому напрямку, знайшли один із листів.
She was the author of the questionnaire that was designed for that program, and we found even a letter that confirms the intentions and that confirms the communication on this topic between the academia from the UK.
На превеликий жаль, це все з 30-ми роками з великим терором було приховано, зупинено і знаходилося в спецфондах. І тільки в 2017 році моя старша колега з Інституту Рильського Тетяна Шевчук опублікувала ці матеріали.
And unfortunately, in the 1930s, after the 1930s, during the Great Terror, all of that information, all of these sources, they were stayed in the archives, they were closed off and not available. And it was only in 2017 that my colleague, a researcher, she published this. She's from the Institute of Relsky. Tetiana Shevchuk is her name.
На жаль, вона сьогодні є біженкою.
Unfortunately, today she is a war refugee.
Дякуючи цим опублікованим матеріалам, ми можемо зіставлювати записи віщих снів про війну з тими записами, які зробила я.
And thanks to these materials, thanks to these sources, we can try and contrast and compare the recordings about the retold dreams, prophetic dreams in particular, and the materials that I managed to take down.
І саме порівняння записів із сторічною перервою дають можливість виявити ось ці патерни, художні патерни, які залишаються стійкими і повторюваними. Те, про що говорила вчора згадуючи Рейнгарда Козена, що важлива повторюваність.
And this is exactly the method of comparing the records from 100 years ago and from today that helps us identify the artistic and the fictional patterns. And this is also very much in line of what we mentioned yesterday about Kozalek, that it's important to have the repetitive, consistent patterns.
Ви можете бачити, що одним із ключових і центральних образів є образ сирого м'яса.
As you can see, one of the central images is the image of the raw meat.
І це трактувалося як війна, до війни, нещастя, смерть.
And that was usually interpreted as the war, this is the omen for the war, the death.
У спогадах в'язнів Аушвіцу «Сни обозове» там є теж цей образ, який говорить про смерть і побиття.
The collection of the inmates, the prisoners of Auschwitz in Sny Obozove also illustrates it. There is also this image of raw meat, and that was interpreted like the omen for being beaten and suffering.
Я вже сьогодні ставила ось цей кадр, це є рукопис архіву з Першої світової війни 1916 року, де фронтовики записували свої сни, освічені книги.
I additionally added to my presentation after yesterday this another slide, which is the illustration of the handwritten recording of the dream from 1916 during the World War I, when the obviously the educated soldiers, they would record their dreams.
Але повернемося до іншого запису сну, який є дуже показовий, тому що його пророчість пов'язана із автобіографією, із триванням історії війни, яка зараз.
But I would like to bring your attention back to one recording of the dream, because it is prophetic in nature, that's one thing, but this propheticity of that dream is directly related to the autobiographical element of the ongoing war.
Я хочу вам спробувати вімкнути голос цього запису.
I would try to play the recording of that so that you could hear the voice of how this dream is retold.
Тому що в українській культуристиці є методика інтерпретування тексту через розуміння його інтонування.
Because there is the method of research, the methodology in the Ukrainian folklore studies of interpreting the text, interpreting the content through interpreting the intonation.
Сновидець, оповідач снів, дрімтелер, він свідомо чи несвідомо наголошує важливі моменти свого сну.
The dream teller would either consciously, deliberately, or unconsciously accentuate and emphasize the important highlights of the dream.
І коли ми транскрибуємо усне мовлення, ми визначаємо спеціальними знаками таке інтонативне, пришвидшене чи сповільнене мовлення.
And when we transcribe within this method, when we transcribe the retelling, we would use the special symbols to mark and to highlight the peculiarities of intonation, whether there is the slowing down or whether trying to speed up in their speech.
Якщо потрібно.
Бачила за 2 дні до початку війни. Вночі 21-22 лютого зрозуміло, що лихо насувається і буде війна. Хоча народилася в Одесі, але для мене малою батьківщиною є Херсонщина. А саме річки, степи, Чорногорова, пристанщина. У вісні бачила, як багато незнайомих мені людей, мій чоловік та я плаваємо в річці Конки, що є притоком Дніпра. Вода брудна, землянистого кольору. Відбувається це в темряві, навіть місяць не світить. Вода стояча, і всі пливуть наче на одному місці, але тримаються поряд. Потім бачу, що в комишах, які висохли, то мають такий колір сіна, лежить 3 викладені віялом ікони. Кожна з яких в дерев'яній широкі рамні під склом. Такі були бабці мої, і є в кожній хаті в Херсонщині, і в селах, і по цей день. На одній з ікон скло було тріснуте. 24 лютого прокинулась від ранішнього дзвінка свата, який повідомив про початок війни. Серце почало вискакувати з грудей, розум не міг сприйняти.
Цей сон має продовження в житті жінки. Тоді, коли вона його побачила, вона не могла знати, що упродовж 1 року захворіє її батько, її сестра, і обидвоє помруть не на рідній землі.
And this dream, basically, what this recording illustrates with all of these accentuated keywords, and this woman could not realize that within the year this dream would come true, like a prophetic dream, because within 1 year her father and her sister would get sick and die, and also out of their native land, outside.
Ми маємо 2 площини розуміння: реалістичну, сучасну, і ми маємо міфологічний пласт.
So here we're talking about the 2 planes, the 2 domains of understanding and interpreting, the realistic interpretation of the content and the methodological layer.
І ми розуміємо, що там, де йдеться про знак сови, це реальна сова прилетіла в то місце, у місті Львові, де зберігався прах батька.
And when we talk about that image, there was this pictogram of the owl. There was the actual owl that came to the place, to the site where the ashes of her father were staying.
І цей факт, жінка, яка народилася у місті, я це наголошую, тому що переважно фольклор пов'язує з традиційним класично-селянським середовищем. Жінка, яка виросла у міській культурі, вона витрактувала зовсім традиційно, що це прилетіла душа батька.
And this woman interpreted this episode in a very traditional way. And here I need to highlight and explain, because usually folklore and the folkloric tradition is directly related and associated with the countryside, with the rural, with the village perception. And this woman who was raised in the urban environment, she would still interpret that image in a very traditional manner, claiming that this is the soul of her father came to this.
І це другий аргумент, який я висуваю, те, що воєнні контексти не дають розуміння до інтерпретації так званих віщих снів і до через віщий сон пояснення чи означення розуміння в невизначений час самого себе і свого майбутнього.
And this is my second statement and argument. I'm trying to claim that the war context is instrumental and very helpful in understanding and interpreting prophetic dreams. The prophetic dreams that represent the attempt to understand yourself in the context of uncertainty, of understanding this world and oneself.
Цей сон я записала від цієї жінки пізніше, і тут треба розрізняти, що велика частина снів з'явилася до війни, до 24 лютого, але не менш цікавими є сни, які виникають, які снять зараз, і які люди розуміють, що вони мають значення. Вони ще не знають, чи це про віщий сон, але що цей сон має значення.
I have recorded this dream that this woman had and much later after February 24. But there are also dreams that people were seeing before February 24. And another important peculiarity is that the dreams that people are seeing today, they tend to interpret them as those that have the important meaning. They understand that they matter. They probably are not able to discern that meaning yet, but they suppose it implies something.
За цими образами, скажімо, зелені листочки, зелені дерева, людина намагається знайти позитивну інспірацію майбутнього.
Such as the green leaves, the green trees as the image are interpreted as the inspiration for the future, the positive sign.
В даній ситуації жінка мріє про те, що було визволено з окупації Херсонщина і її мала батьківщина.
In this case, this lady, the dream teller, she really aspires to see her native place, the Kherson region, to be liberated from the occupation.
Інший сон від іншої жінки з Полтавського регіону, в якій вона побачила своїх предків. Загалом образ предків у фольклорі є дуже потужний і дуже знаковий. Прихід померлих родичів, батьків, матері, батька – це завжди є попередження про що. І це є побажання захисту. І таких снів є теж багато.
Another dream recorded from a woman from Poltava region also includes a very powerful image, the image of her ancestors. Usually in folklore, the image of ancestors when they come to visit, it's about the warning, it's about the desire to protect, and that's a very typical and very common image in folklore, which is considered very powerful.
Окремо групу займають сни, в яких є алегоричні образи зла. Такими образами, як правило, є Путін, Москва, Мавзолей, солдати російські і мілітарні образи, предмети, об'єкти.
There is a separate category, a group of dreams with this image of evil, everything, all things evil. Usually, there are very concrete images of Putin, of Moscow, of Mausoleum, of soldiers, and all of the other sorts of military objects associated with the evil.
І мотив Москва, яка потопає, вона є і у фольклорних візіях, і в мас-медійному просторі, в численних піснях, які тепер були.
And this line, this image of Moscow going down, drowning, it is widely represented and present in those dreams, retold and also in the mass media.
А тепер сон, який я записала від мужчини, який з 2014 року був на фронті.
And here's the dream that I recorded from a man who has been in the war, in the combat since 2014.
В чому особливість з моєї точки зору культуриста? Цей сон культуризований. Він є постійно розказуваний, ретрансльований.
I believe, as a folklore researcher, that this dream is very special and peculiar because it's folklorized. It keeps telling and retelling.
Інформатор сказав мені, у мене в бригаді знають його всі.
The dream teller, the informant told me that in my brigade, everyone knows this dream.
І ви бачите, що низка образів є цілком символічні, вони походять із словника оніричних образів.
And as you can see, there is the range of images present here, and they are very symbolic. They're like a part of the oniric vocabulary, typical vocabulary.
Ці образи трансформовані в казках, в легендах і в інших жанрах культури, типових жанрів культури.
These images, they are transformed and widely represented in fairy tales, in legends, and other forms of typical folklore.
Але ми бачимо таку гібридизацію явищ культурних, тому що двоголова ворона – це походить із тих поширених карикатурних образів з Першої світової війни.
But we can see this hybrid nature of the images intertwining and permeating the cultures, because, for example, this image of the two-headed crow, which was mentioned here, it comes from the World War I with the widespread images from those times.
І тепер трохи аналітики.
And now we will give you some of the analysis.
Ці образи, які я виділила у снах, в 50 сюжетах, вони групуються за такими виразними групами.
From all these 50 stories, from these 50 plots, I managed to identify the following groups.
І це те, на чому ми можемо будувати компаративні дослідження.
And I believe this could lay the basis for the comparative research.
Я спробувала представити таблицю, в якій є образи, які ведуть до тлумачення їх як на війну в нашому сьогоднішньому розумінні. Ті образи, які вони мали тлумачення у 20-х роках ХХ століття, які всередині, які мають в іншій традиції, сусідній традиції, польській традиції, і ми маємо ось ці співпадіння, перекресні стежки повторюваності.
And here in this table, I was trying to show and compare those images and how they are interpreted as an omen of war, coming from those stories that I explored, comparing with the 1920s and those images, and also comparing with the middle of the century, and comparing them with the other cultural tradition, the adjacent tradition, the neighboring one, the Polish tradition. And here you can see the overlapping of these images and their interpretations.
Полем для дослідження майбутнього може бути з'ясування семантики до війни, чітко образ прив'язаний до війни, і образи пов'язані до узагальнення, щось погане, як ми це бачимо у словнику Станіслави Нібжибовської, відомої етнолінгвістки польської.
I believe the future tracks of research on the basis of this information could focus on the semantics of the images before the war, and also as an omen of the war, and also as an omen of the generalized evil, as we can see also this from the dictionary of Nijibowska, well known as images.
І якщо ми бачимо групи, то дуже важливими є групи А-дій. І сьогодні вже говорилось про те, що Франкові снилося як вірш про той сон, що син пісяє. Насправді ось ця дія, яка б вона не була, вона має дуже символічне значення. Ви бачите, в попередньому сні це як еквівалент води, очищувальної води.
And there is a whole separate important group of images that could be called actions, and everything related to actions could be interpreted separately as an important symbol. Previously in the other presentation, Bogdan was telling about the dream that Franco saw about his son who was peeing. And this is, in fact, a very powerful action because everything related to water, purification, clarifying, would be interpreted in terms of this action. And actions would be an important group to research.
Друга важлива група – це populated space.
Another important group related to populated spaces.
Які поділяються на свій чужий простір.
That are also divided into like one's own and alien spaces.
І є група, яка специфічна. Це група non-traditional images.
And another very peculiar group of non-traditional, non-conventional images.
В графічному відображенні, в кількісному, воно виглядає так, що простір, в віщих снах в простірі є найбільш важливим. В віщих снах на війну. Ми захищаємо простір і ми снимо про цей простір.
And here is the graphic representation of the correlation of these groups of symbols and images. And here you can see that space occupies a very important place here in prophetic dreams in particular, everything related to the war and space, because we are protecting the space in the war.
У мене є один запис, в якому є переказ сну. Це вже сон, який бачив хтось інший.
I have one recording, which is the retelling of the dream of another person's dream.
Жінка бачила хрест, бачила зорі у вигляді хреста. І це те, про що ми вчора теж слухали про сни з зображенням сім'ям хреста.
There is this lady who was seeing a dream and she would see the stars in the shape of the cross. This is related to what we discussed yesterday about this cross.
Її тлумачення було однозначне до війни.
And her interpretation was absolutely certain. This is the omen for the war.
Отже, і висновки, які я хочу вам представити.
And my conclusions are
що ми маємо справу із символічними кодами, за допомогою яких встановлюємо відповідності між уявним і реальним світом. І ця система цих образів, вона є інструментом, дієвим інструментом для розкриття сутності невідомих явищ, особливо в сучасній людині.
So we're talking about the symbolic codes that help us interpret and compare the real and the imaginary world, which could be an important toolkit to the interpretation and explanation of the phenomena, also related with the unconscious.
Моя практика як інтерв'юера переконує, що вони мають процес записування і вербалізації снів має явно компенсаторну функцію терапевтичної.
And my experience of an interviewer also confirms that the very process of sharing, the process of recording and verbalizing the dreams also has the therapeutic effect.
Сни, які почали бачити українці з середини 23-го року, вони переважно спрямовані на позитивні і світлі образи, на мотиви визволення, мотиви перемоги.
The dreams that people started seeing after the middle of 2023, they have distinctly positive images, very light, bright images associated with the liberation, with the victory.
У мене там є відео, де відеокліп до пісні, самодіяльної пісні. Я не знаю, чи мені дасть його вимкнути.
I included the media file with the video when the people, they're not professional singers, would be singing a song.
Це є самодіяльний кліп.
And also it was like a whole video made.
Але образи, які використані в цьому Для мене було важливо показати, що у кліпі використані образи, які є дуже типовими у снах. Це є гриби, міст, вода, річка, ліс і дім, зруйнований дім.
So I found it very important to show with this video and this performance that this newly created modern song does include the conventional, very traditional images and symbols of the bridge, mushrooms, water, river, the forest, the woods, and the home, the destroyed home.
Дякую за увагу.
Okay, we have an hour, so we can talk about this.
Софія
Yeah, so hello everybody. It's after lunch. We have session with archiving dreams. So how something such ephemeral can have archival life, and what does that mean? So we have the presentation about ongoing project. I think that also would be a great opportunity for feedback and comment, because this is something which is not complete and can benefit a lot from comments and encouragement and some possibilities. So it's my pleasure to present with Professor Wojciech Obszarski, who comes from Gdańsk, and he is in field of literature, theater, and culture studies, and he's a professor at Gdańsk University. Where he's apart from being working at the Department of Polish Language and Literature, he's having the research unit for dream, memory, and imagination study. Imagination is also on the wall of this building. He wrote extensively, including monographic research on literature and dreams, but also co-edited volumes. Today he will speak about his ongoing project, which builds on previous research. Wojciech, the floor is yours.
I will present is a very preliminary report because I completed this number. So it's very preliminary. I investigated personally 15 things and fled to Poland after the Putin's invasion in 2022. The age was from 18 to 77 years, village almost 31. I collected 210 dreams in the total. They came to Poland the week or two after this months, and there are some which came later, but the majority of them came from just after the war. They come from the eastern Ukraine, so they managed to say experience trauma. As even after 1 week of the Poland, they managed to be really in the trauma. According to my diagnosis, 54% of them can be diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But in fact, they are much more traumatized than this number, because diagnosing PTSD is not an easy task, and if one criterion is not met, we don't have to, we can't diagnose PTSD. But in fact, almost all of them have a lot of PTSD symptoms. But none of these women report that. So typical PTSD nightmares. As you know, typical PTSD nightmares are nightmares that are recurrent. They illustrate some memory schemes, memory events, still in the same way without any change, and they are persisting and come still. So none of these women reported the very strong typical PTSD nightmares, but 58% of them said that they had nightmares, I call it normal nightmares, the nightmares as we know them from every life, not very specific PTSD. This about what I found in 78% of the women. Okay. And the most frequent things of these dreams is dream-related things, ruined city, bombarded apartment, being alone, absolutely isolated, alone. Of course, it's been fear and helpless. This is the most important critical of this game. Although I haven't managed yet to conduct the very precise content analysis. I'm going to do this in the near future. I will do it in accordance with Kevin Hall and Van de Castle study system, because as I know it is the most popular and most common the scale of content analysis. And of course, I will count also other teams of this, but I'm sorry, I prefer today. Okay, and so let's see some examples of the dreams that are work-related dreams. For example, I walked down the street of midlife. Some buildings are still here, others disappeared. It means in front of me, everything looks like it was before the war. But I know that behind me, there are only ruins. I'm alone, the town is completely empty. I'm scared and depressed. And I think this is very typical, one of the most typical, most frequent themes in the dreams connected to the world. Another example, it will be about the volume of the landscape. Again, so it is, I asked some about it, because this is absolutely different from that described as sound. I mean, I'm in my living chair. To the window, I see that the missile landed in a schoolyard. I'm quiet and I'm thinking where to cut, but realizing the missile is so close to my house and kind of doesn't make any sense. I want to avoid that if it was close. I sit down on the sofa and see that the president Volodymyr Zelensky sits in front of me. I ask you, what do we do? In the second staff manager in the school will be here, but he says, what can we do? No, it's nothing to us. We are at an impasse. I feel helpless. No, this is quite different about Putin. And the next speaking this day is the only occurrence of political figure. There were no things for Putin, no other things for the next speaking. Other politicians are absolutely these things. So this is very excellent. Okay, I will skip this. Okay. You can find some dream theories which explains and justifies the things. I of course recount in 90 because it's a dream from my before, which means that we dream about what we are experiencing, either personal and just we are listening about and thinking about our schedule. Yes, very common dream theory. But I'm thinking about the stress simulation theory of dreaming, also about under the whole law. And this I don't know if familiar with this theory that madness and bad dreams are our attempts to rehearse some difficult situations to life so that we can cope with them in the real life. Yes? This is a very interesting dream theory. I think some of the dreams of this women can have some in common with this theory as well. And as I said, I will do this dream content analysis. And what interests me most often, I'm obsessed with the theme of helpful, healing, therapeutic. Yes, I try to investigate such things in manner and work where I did this in this. Example, I found 58% of these women recounted some kind of healing. I assess the healing effects of this only based on what they say. Yes, I don't exaggerate. If a woman said, after waking up, I was better, I felt better, I said this is a helpful therapeutic thing. If she doesn't say something, I'm not going to take this into this set of therapeutic things. The first kinds of therapeutic days. These are days I call the dreams of return to Ukraine, and for making Ukrainian family members created 70 women reported 25 such dreams. And this is an example. I often hear about my home in Ukraine. There are my husband, our friends, and neighbors with me. I know that the war is home and that I live in Poland actually. But in this dream, I can come back to the past and I'm happy to see these people. After waking up, I'm calm and glad that at least in a dream I could be at home. I'd like to have some dreams every night. It was supposed to be the concentration camp. It was supposed to be. So, if I could understand the Spanish days, I would use the compensatory effects in a very simple manner, and maybe even anti-disguise which would came up according to practical sports wrote about disguise which would came, but sometimes we admit that, for example, the wishes are anti-disguise and the fulfillment which is anti-disguise. It is a very simple kind of compensatory and wish fulfillment dreams which are really helpful for them, whether you talk about those dreams with great energy and students in their eyes. It is something that really works. However, dreams about returning home, meeting allot, I see that it's family and the smart 70 women involved in 19 destructive returning dreams. Okay. I'm in the path that leads to my childhood come the place where I meet with my husband before the law. He still lives there, so stay in Ukraine. But there is a wall on the road, and I can't bypass it. I can't reach her house. There is a gate in the wall, and finally I go through this gate, but still can't come to the house. I see my husband and the neighbor. I talk with them. I see that the neighbor's girls came into my garden. I said, they take them out. I'm sad because I can't charge or improve anything. My husband is sad too. After waking up, I'm still sad and worried about my family in Ukraine. For me, it's a big question why sometimes dreams about connecting with the past, dreams about coming back to home are very helpful. But in our lives, in our people, in our dreams are absolutely devastating. Yeah? I try to find some reasons, but in this case, I couldn't find any correlation between such things. And for example, the social status, the age of these women, I mean, this is a mystery. Still, why? In some places it's like that, and in others it's absolutely other. I hope I will find some answers, but I'm not ready for this now. So, okay. Another kind of helpful dreams, I call it just present dreams that trigger good energy and optimism. 10 dreams of 8 women. I often dream about swimming in the sea, the water is clear, and I think that's good. It is a great pleasure. I feel enlightenment. After waking up, I feel with hope. So, the effect of improving something in life is connected only with this very, very pleasant feeling. Yeah? There is no interpretation. There is no knowledge about the possible dreaming is here. They just being more energetic or optimistic, taking back. It's also in other kinds of things. Another, the third category is metaphorical dreams, but it is not very often only given and describe the course of dreams. And this is an example. I was in a grand city both were floating around and ashes were everywhere. While I was going through this town, small flowers started to grow from the ashes. I was scared, but the flowers made me die. I knew that they meant life. After waking up, I thought that life wouldn't disappear and Ukraine would revive. It's very interesting kind of therapeutic game. I will try to connect it with our theories. First of all, Erika Bourignon is the field of anthropological research described what's called self-evident or pre-interpreted dreams. That she said that some dreams are understandable from the very beginning by the dreamer without the need for interpretation, looking for things. They wake up absolutely at the very beginning understand what this dream means, what it is about. Yes? And in such metaphorical dreams, there is no need to interpret. The dreamer understands it from organic acts. Another important politician is Don Wickham, and he wrote about impactful dreams, for good dreams and bad dreams, and he also stressed that each impactful dreams is understandable at the very beginning by the dreamer. And of course, my favorite dream theorist ever, Ernest Hartman, who wrote about explanatory metaphoric dreams or central English dreams, and then he was absolutely convinced that in both dreams there's always a metaphor which has a very emotional meaning and emotional effect on the dream. Another type of good dreams are dreams interpreted by the women as good omens, that are already during my set dreams. And this example, I dreamt about two big, beautiful, colorful farmers. In the morning, I thought that this was the bronze pit in Ukraine. It's the area of the kind of dream, but I think it is different. And this woman was convinced that if she has colorful dreams, it is good. If she has black and white, it is bad. After waking up, she didn't express emotional this feeling of Thomas' vision pain, but she does realize that dreams can mean through symbols, and she knew that the color in her dreams means something positive, something good. So this is a dream book like understanding of dreaming in like yes. And the last kind of helpful dreams is so-called problem-solving dreams. Not very often. Two women only describe parts of dreams. Problem-solving dreams, you know, very about wrote a lot and a book, Coming to Sleep. I can recommend if you want to go deep into the subject. What it means for me. It is a kind, I think it is really kind of prophetic, but in this specific case, I named problem-solving because you can see one woman said. After some time more, I had to settle a dilemma. Should we stay here for good or prepare for coming back to Ukraine when it is possible? It was a difficult choice. One night I dreamed of my deceased father. He was stroking my soft hair. I said, "Oh, Daddy, I'd like to ask you a question." I know he survived in my dilemma, but I didn't ask him about it. He gave my son a smile, and my son said to me, "Grandpa says we should stay here." Next day, I decided to stay in Poland for good. And she stayed. She opened the restaurant in Putz, in the small city of Poland. She integrated well into the Polish society, the local society. She functions quite well. Thanks to this gift. It was a bad advance given by this father. What is next? And also this joint on the back of the skip it. Can we go to
Course.
So it's in metaphor and then all good command that the works as fancy and just good feeling and everything is that's all the guys I just like to learn.
Some of the
I think very different from parents, but I am going to investigate in these things. So first of all, the council of Britain and interpreting. The goal conviction of all this don't let bad dreams because they will come true. And at least don't tell them before noon. After noon, you can. Yes. And I was told I was surprised for so many women decided this was devastating to my research because it's so difficult for me to 550 women willing to share the drama. I end my collection months. It took me 6 or 7 months because it's probably. And even if these women didn't believe this, they said, okay, but my grandma or my mother said something, and I don't believe it. But, you know, and my father go to people to say, was so glad that I forced them to kind of this. I'm going to say about it and really sad about the consequences. I hope there is the bar after my interview with that. So this is absolutely interesting thing. When it comes to the dream sharing practices, they rarely share dreams. They share them only with very close family members and friends. There is nothing. There is no something like common in sharing. What I told you yesterday, it is absolutely common in artists. It's understandable because there is situation in Poland, although very, very sad. It is not comparable to the situation in the concentration camps, of course. But I was surprised a little bit. I realized that these women are not very well integrated, both in the Polish society, but also in the Ukrainian society. They do it alone, only in the very narrow family circle. They don't have friends, Ukrainian friends, sometimes but they are isolated. And so they don't share their things also. So for me, it's very significant feature of the style. Well, I asked about what do you think about dreams generally, what's the philosophy of dreaming? This, yes, I believe sometimes in dreams. I believe in being spiritual oriented, yes, and I read the dream books. I look into the internet. But in fact, it's not so important. But still, I get the impression that the Ukrainian women are much more involved in dream interpreting than Polish people. As I investigated Polish people in 2017 about a similar topic, about the attitudes towards dreams, and most of them were not interested in this. But I don't think that this is the cultural difference between Polish and Ukrainian people, because we are very similar. I think that the cause of this difference is that now the Ukrainian women live in the dark time. And because people generally believe when something wrong, people in the conservation camps after some years, after some 30 years, after liberation, I was stupid. I was so naive. I can't believe. I believe in dreams there. Now, when I'm in a good situation, I don't believe. So this is different. But not the cardinal difference, but the difference of defining on the situation. It's fine. I'm going to do this, right? As well as the kind of representation of the legal and symbolic representation of I would not comment about Islamic perhaps by more what is the related concepts in game are not very frequent and any related I was sure that the dreams. And then something very interesting about the situation of these women, not only as war victims, but also as immigrants in Poland. But it is very clear. It's about Polish people, about the situation in Poland. They are absolutely obsessed still with the war, with this, which is problem. But it is interesting. They say, okay, we didn't have any bad situation with Polish people are the best, we love it, so I don't believe that. But they didn't maybe they didn't want to share with me as well their bad dreams about Polish people and relations with people. I believe that.
It's very important.
Okay. Another illusion, of course, they can be helped with coping with trauma. My main message I think that therapists should more often work with dreams, especially in the Eastern and Central Europe, and therapists are not so much interested in dreams that they are in the Western countries. If even during our talks, I know that our therapists, I didn't interpret the things to them, I just talked with them half an hour. And even during our talks, many women realize what the dreams told them. And they decided to pay more attention to the dreams in the future. So I'm absolutely convinced it is neglected but important topic to work with dreams with people in the trauma situation. Isolation, I told you, they are not well connected with the society. Both in Jason and your lives, there is very little the social interactions in the days, combined with the norms of kind of for among us. So this is some kind of isolation illustrated in this. In the case, usually does not have a community building fund on set that I thought would be the very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm just almost like removing the questions, which is a different role than I have here. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker and my colleague, Bogdan Szmulowicz, who is a researcher at the Center for Urban History and associate professor at Cultural Studies at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. So Bogdan works across several themes and disciplines, cultural studies and history, but also visual studies. And in his focus is media history in Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, as well as media art and urban spatial practices and urban creativity. So dreams came into Bogdan's life unexpectedly, naturally. So please tell us more about the project.
Thank you, Sophia. I will talk more about the methods. Even though the Center for Urban History is not the institution that is focused on such issues like dreams, and we started this project as a side project We made a lot of documenting activities when the war started. I was leading a group of students at the Catholic University, and I worked with them in order to use diaries. So we were doing equal documents of war, and out of this initiative, Dreams emerged, and and because of this, we have at least 3 blocks of various, let's say, documents. Yes, so the project which we started with students collecting equal documents, we call 2 months of war, because it started very early, but it ended also very quickly. It helps students to recover. So at a certain moment already in late spring, they stopped writing diaries. Some of them continued up until midsummer, but out of 60 students who volunteered to write diaries, only 30 have managed to actually produce something. And then we stopped very quickly. But then out of this, we had 33 collections of personal diaries. They are very different. Some of them are very extensive, like 80 pages long, almost like books. And then we had correspondence with dreams. And then the other step was, okay, we realized that dreams are naturally coming through these diaries. And we decided let's do also something else with these dreams. So I started recording my fellow scholars in the beginning. So those who I've seen around. So I started making audio records. And then we continued. Now we have 62 dreams recorded. These are again as audio interview. They have a specific format, but then also I don't know whether this works. So we have I differentiate them as audio records, but then written records. And here in this section, we also have dreams which I call found dreams. So for instance, I browse Facebook or Telegram, and then I see that someone posting the dream. People often do this, and then I copy paste, save the link, and I call them the found dream. And since I'm not going to publish this, I don't go into this procedural that please give me whatever rights, because if people decided to share the dream, then it's rather a public issue. And then the third block, we produced together with Sophia a questionnaire, which was influenced heavily also by author who brought us the subject of night studies. We were not really into this. So this questionnaire is lengthy, so it demands 40-60 minutes from a person to sign in. But we have now 19 dreams. It will grow. I see the dynamics. So, for instance, whenever I make a post somewhere on Facebook asking, "Oh, people, we need your dreams," and then it's like, and then if you don't spread this, if you don't advertise, the activities go down. But again, I differentiate them in different forms because we have different outcomes out of these various approaches. I also indicated here, sorry for this definition, any dreams. I have several dreams. Some of my colleagues, Russians, we don't communicate now, but in the beginning of war, we still exchanged messages. They would, express the pity and whatever. And then some of them share their dreams also. So we have some dreams from the other side. We made announcements. This is from the Center for History. I also made some publications elsewhere on media saying that people, we are collecting dreams or diaries, but it doesn't really work. People don't want to share this unless we come to them. And especially with this questionnaire, I have to find with this long one, the last section, I have to find a specific groups. So then I will chase groups on Telegram or elsewhere where people are more or less active, and then I will ask them, people, if you have dreams, please share, and then they send a response. But we try, we advertise, we make seminars, And actually, this was the sequence of events which led to this one. So then continuously discussing this, and then it brought some results. I mean, we don't have a specific theoretical attitude since we are not ethnographers, we are not anthropologists, we are historians. I'm talking about anthropological history. So I knew, of course, about Charlotte Berat. I read in that time Kozarek's reflections on Charlotte Berat's book. But it doesn't have text, basically. I mean, he's more like philosophical, his texts are very philosophical, Charlotte's selection is very political, and then it doesn't give you kids how to collect. So what you do when you collect these? Of course, the photographers they are much more, they have much more instruments, as we may say, weapons, yes, but better to say instruments. Essentially, when it comes to dreams, I'm deciding here about number of whatever you, this is French, I don't know this pronunciation. The dream appears strange, incoherent, delirious, or incongruous in the eyes of the person who has produced it. And especially for us historians, when you encounter with this, so for people who produce dreams, it's difficult, for us it's even more difficult. And we understand that dream is a mental phenomenon, but at least to generalize in our methodological take, actually I learned this from Bernard Mounier that he wrote that actually if you don't have a developed language, so if you don't have a semiotic system, you can't produce phonetic text. So you can't produce a dream as a sequence. You produce just flashes or images. So for children between 3 and 5 years old, they don't have kind of narrative dreams. They have them only when they learn language. And this is very interesting piece for me. So you have, in order to have images in dreams, you need to have language with semiotic structure. Then dreams come to you as images, and then again we record them as text. And this relation was really exciting for me, at least. So with working with this idea of ego documents, and here you come up with very complicated ego document, which has a lot of layers. We followed Edward Schneider differentiation. He would say that text, at least you can differentiate text into 5 forms, like recorded, recalled, imagined, observed, or invented. And I find to kind of fit. So he would say that letters or diaries were imagined text. But then we all understand that these typologies we encounter when we work with such ego documents. So recorded, when we make an interview, recalled when someone, for instance, fill in the questionnaire, it's not recorded, it's rather memorized or recalled. Imagined is like diaries, letters, observed or invented, and so on. So I will introduce you to some forms of these documents that we collected in these 3, let's say, genres. I don't know what to call it. So like this imagined text, recorded text, and recalled text. Again, imagined text, these are texts which were produced within this initiative to collect diaries. And from these diaries, we got dreams. So here diaries kind of part of, dreams are part of diary, like writing himself of himself. Then recorded, we made these audio recordings, the recordings of dreams in a formal interview way. And then recall text, we considered these kind of either written by hand or made through the questionnaires. So when people, we have distance, we don't really know who are those people. And this case, so I will, the first case I will show you, it has some images, but they're not exactly related to our collection. But within these diaries, you have, today it was already reported, we have a lot of discussions and homes. So space is crucially important in these beliefs. Again, I emphasize that these are dreams that come together with diaries. So when people are writing diaries, they would report like, oh, yesterday I had a dream and so on. So often we have these kind of dreams of house falling down, cities destroyed, plenty of rockets and bombardment. And then often people who would make such statements, they will make also images. And that's what I like fascinating, like with Timothy Mitchell argues, text is never separate from image or visual, and visual is never work without text. And again, this image-text relation within dream is, I think, is very important to remember. That's why in the first section I have these images. So in the spring of last year, Ukrainian and international media reported the high percentage of rapes that took place on the occupied territory. So we had a lot of reports saying, like, this is from the Guardian, rape has happened, huge scale of sexual violence inflicted in Ukraine, murders. And this is April. So you see, this is the early April, which means the Bucha was recently liberated, the end of March, and the Ukrainians and international audience discovered these huge atrocities. And then I followed on Facebook some artists, and I realized that people do diaries in different ways. So some people write, and those who had this phenomenon of mutism, they couldn't really express themselves through language, they expressed themselves through images. And I selected several images of people who posted them on the Facebook and Instagram. This is one example. The image is specifically called rape. And this is 4th of April. So this publication is 4th of April. On the 4th of April, she posted this image, which is called rape. This is female artist. And then in 2 weeks, she posted this image, which is called The Love of a Russian Soldier. And as you see, the female is already there. And these, as was mentioned, very often poets or artists, they give the sources for imagination. Because I was interviewing these people asking, what is the reason that you represent such things? You are not the victim. Why do you need to imagine this? And this is a very difficult, tough question also for them. They wanted to express some empathy, but it's not only about empathy, it's something else. So again, I emphasize, here you have these publications, every April, and you have images. And this one is 13th of April. And this is the male artist who also made this image, Russian soldier rapes Ukrainian woman. This is for Kino. So come like one by one. They post them on social media. There are much more of them. I just selected these 3 ones. And this male artist, he doesn't show you this destroyed corporeality of the body or the scene, but he shows you kind of this kind of touching, which is diseased. So the Russian culture is already kind of there. Here is a woman there. Here is male character there. Though he has an erection, so probably you can recognize that there is a scene of rape here. And then the dream section of my students, I come up with the same. This is the date, the April, and Sanya Kachkovska, she agrees to release her name. She doesn't mind. So in my dream, we came to my grandma to celebrate Easter in Colombia. We invited some guests, but they called and said they didn't come because the police are driving around the city looking for victims, raped by Russian soldiers. I was one of the victims. My mother told me that I have experienced violence and must inform the police. She said it in her regular voice. The day was very sunny. This is Easter, and she recalls this story that her mom tells her that you were raped and you need to go and report this. And why I'm showing this kind of in the sequence of images and media and the dream, because this was produced within the diaries section. And in this regard, I see that some of these dreams were kind of part of these ego documents which reacted on reality. And you can use it as historian, a set of documents which can report, witness, or be sources for historians. For following the Idre bar that was mentioned by Wojciech also, you may say that such dreams constitute a unique window on trauma and its effects. But I also like this definition of quiet trauma, which is developed also by anthropologists, and the Barrett calls it common traumas. And it's important because we are talking not about this direct trauma when the person has a traumatic experience when you are 8 or you are encountering real violence. But for instance, in Ukrainian case, every day I watch the scenes of violence. Every night I go to sleep, I watch the telegram, and there are plenty of images of violence. And it gives me kind of peace. I can sleep looking for violence, which is very strange. So I understand that I'm rather normal living in a normal situation. And this kind of traumatic experience we can frame as common or quiet trauma. So we are traumatized, but this is not the same trauma as people have with these kind of referential, sequential dreams, with what Wojciech already mentioned. Such traumas, they are similar to what is called in the literature bereavement, when you have this kind of important loss, a huge loss, so you lose something. And I would say that many Ukrainians feel this losing something very important and very valuable, like space, home, relatives, whatever. Okay, recorded texts, they come in the form of interviews. And I indicate in this archive that mainly audible, so you can listen what Oksana said. You can hear how people use intonation, and then how they also project these stories. So these are specific texts, and but here we encountered the similar stories as elsewhere. So this dream is typically represents the road. So this is the male who said that he dreams if he is on the road in his native town, and then he sees the elderly woman, and then there are other people, and they help her, and they ask him not to help her, and they go somewhere in this road. Of course, it's kind of this metaphorical being. You have the road, you have these elderly people, probably it's about death, dying, and so on. So he's clearly asked not to go there, and he in these dreams, what is specific, what we discovered, we ask people in these audio interviews, please tell us your dream from your childhood, which follows you, and all of them have these dreams that which follow them. Often these are dreams about escape, also about road, dying, often, and then they recall 1 or 2 dreams which they had after the war started. So this is a specific collection, and it has such reports. You have also a lot of running away, moving. I used to dream the motive of running away and moving. I dreamt in my childhood that I was running away from a dog, and then I had an unpleasant dream when I had to pack my life into a limited number of suitcases or boxes. I also dream of black earth from which bright green sprouts something so dark and scary from which light sprouts, and this dream gave me a feeling of strength and life then. So typical stories that we already heard today. We have a song, plenty of song dreams. This was very important. This was the first city, which was big city, which was liberated, which was, of course, occupied. This was a kind of collective quiet drama for big population of Ukrainians. So you have this Kherson in many dreams, though many people don't really travel to Kherson. In this dream, you see that this is a female dreamer. She says, in terms of aesthetic, it was a city of Soviet finance buildings surrounded by water. It reminded me of Venice. The strange Venice, Soviet. She was escaping her son, this Venice, Soviet Venice, on the boat line in Venice, was not cheap to use Soviet instrument. We asked, so center paid some people to collect these. This is our former student, Anastasia, and she is recording these dreams. Often these people do not hide, they want to tell these stories. Again, we have these various ethical attitudes. Of course, we sign all the important papers about the agreements, consent forms, biograms, when we do interviews. But of course, people are different. So some prefer not to show their faces. Some prefer to show their faces. Some hide behind nicks. Some prefer to show full names. Very different attitudes. So no one single protocol. I have many various attitudes here. And this is actually this female who tells the story. She has the homosexual relations, and this is represented in her dreams. So about her girlfriend, and she tells in the dream there was difficult relations with relatives. So we have like these personal stories intermingled with work and moving and traumatic experiences. So exactly when the war started, she had this dream that her father, with whom he had very difficult relations, as they often come in dreams, he came to help her. So he told her, so he showed her a message, text message, so it's time to run away, and she's now in Poland, and with a girlfriend, so they ran away. So we, again, as in the previous section, we have a lot of scenes of destruction, but also scenes of regeneration. And we have variety of symbols like trees, the journey of life, so-called. So this metaphor of traveling. Animals, a lot of animals. I dreamt animals before, in the night before the war started. I dreamt my cat, and we were saying rats. So there are plenty of dogs, cats, birds, everything that makes Susanna happy, they are there. You have also these feelings of coldness, loneliness, darkness, light, they also appear in these dreams, because we often ask them, what is your emotions, what you feel after you kind of wake up, what is your feeling? And people can often describe, this or anxiety or joy or uncertainty, coldness, darkness, everything they can actually communicate. And it's important, this again makes Susanna happy, that myths, legends, and fairy tales are all contribute to modern dreamer stories and feelings about X and B, and these ideas are still active in our dreams, whether or not we are aware of them. This is the citation from Garfield, but I have a lot of these kind of fairy tale messages in dreams that we collect. And the context, this is the interviews that we do, not interviews, but questionnaires. This is the third section. And in questionnaires, we mainly have females, almost 99%. Males don't want to share their dreams. And this is not because in Oksana's case, you normally interview females who were traveling to the West, escaping the war. So in many collections, you have kind of 90% of females because they could move, and males were fine. But then this question is open for everything. And then still we have females mainly reporting, and males kind of not really sharing their dreams. Validated, because in questionnaire we can ask a lot of questions. So they're mainly validated, often engaged in creative cultural industries, so they do various humanistic fields, like writers, copywriters, video masters, and photographers, and so on. And this section is special because here we inserted these questions about nightlife. And nightlife gave us also some very interesting perspective on how people are living through curfew, many other activities. And we have very different reports. So some people would say that in principle nothing has changed from February 24. I sat at home, I haven't been at the ball champion. The only thing that changed was moving to the league, but the main thing remains the same. I have the best before that, the best CNTV. But this is not the only. For instance, this report was the third one. I was crazy. This is the female reporting about the nightlife. It seems like there is no truth here in the. There are a bunch of people companies singing around, people getting around, smashing bottles, laughing, fighting with each other, honking. But last summer, 102, this is the police number. What's my favorite number in the family? And so, one thing that is not in the view, someone reports that she's obsessed with those people singing, drinking, and fighting during the night on the streets of the city. And this is not a common scene actually, but I also do this often, and we have people who report this. The most interesting places, from bad to cold basements and hospitals, to homeless in European countries, and refugees in Ukraine that I have never seen before. So we have also these now reports about people spending their nights and nightlife in various places and situations. And these are some examples also of dreams which have the same recurring subjects as I reported during this seminar. So the importance of space and homes. So the homes are predominant in all three sections. So people report homes in their dreams very often. I look at the house and I realize it looks strange, and when I notice that it's not a house at all, it starts to transform into a triangular flying object and miraculously rises into the sky. So the eyes transform into the flying machine and flew away. We had a dream when the person describes that I get up from my house and there was a huge drone coming down on my apartment, like building. So roads and houses, destruction, people cannot get home or they cannot escape from home. These are plenty of. But also this transition, this family has this also social part. What Oksana said that this is the male who reported that he often told this dream to his family. So he had a dream that they need to escape, and he repeatedly was retelling this dream to his family members. Sometimes they say, I told you, this was my dream, they have this also. A lot of rockets, shooting, shelling, even sounds of shelling and the rockets, they are also in dreams. I had one dream several times during 22-23 when I came to the hospital to see my boyfriend. Another dream I had on the night of the missiles were falling on the city where I was staying. And often when these missiles were falling, it's already was reported that the person who dreams realizes that she or he cannot do anything. So they prefer to stay and die. So they just report these dreams. A lot of airplanes. One lady reported the whole festival of airplanes in her dream. And probably this was also due to the huge media coverage, the huge campaign asking to cover the sky, to close the sky over Ukraine. So it was the kind of this pledge to NATO. So please close the sky. And airplanes were really important in these dreams. It's a very strange dream. A large old bed in the middle of the night field where my family, 9 people, my parents, siblings, and me, is lying in a huddle. And this is a crowd of strangers, butts are open, everyone is having fun, music is playing, fire is burning, there are lanterns, food, and drinks. She's sleeping somewhere in the field outside, and there is a festival in this field. Okay, the feelings, I'm finishing already. We have a lot of, again, this is questionnaire, so we have a lot of questions, and people report various feelings, but what is interesting, they often report that everything is very realistic. So what happened was as if it was real. And probably they often then tell that these dreams help them. Like if they were very real, like with this food She was well involved. So sometimes they report that these realistic dreams help them. But often they say about these feelings as if it was real. Sometimes they say that this was the end of life, but also the absence of fear, awareness of end, and sometimes they report anxiety and misunderstanding. So it's for now I can't really count like in budget situation, how many anxious dreams or happy dreams. But what we see various stories which are very much connected to the methods we made focus, like we focus on this story. So in questionnaires we have a lot of nightlife. In audio stories we have a lot of kind of these analytical dreams, and then in diaries we have media influenced stories very much. This is a girl who she prefers to be called Solar Key, and she uses the app. This is very interesting. She uses the app which is called Dreamcatcher, and she has hundreds of dreams in her app. She shared with us almost 100 dreams. So she sent it in a separate file. So, yeah, only her dreams. And she has even some hints. So she says that if you sleep on your whatever side and you have a dream, you open your eyes, don't turn, because you will lose your dream. Yeah. So she grabs the phone and she records that in the same position. So she has one of these how to record her dreams to keep them.
That's because they fall out of your ear.
For instance, she has this, and she's very effective. So she analyzed her dreams, and she reported the dream. I was hiding in a chair that stopped longer at its penultimate stop. It was very beautiful around such red green grass. You could admire this beauty before the final stop. When I woke up, I felt very sad and cried. I associated the dream with the deaths, the final stop. So she is kind of even too reflexive. So the final stop of the child, even though there are beautiful scenery in the dream, she associated with the deaths. And she has a lot of dreams about that, but she also reported the dream with Putin, and there was one with Zelensky. This one is like she reported it on April 5th. I was in Australia. The Russians are going to burn the whole world, starting with the thing. Our plan wants to be done this by using a huge amount of water. They have a sleep and then they but the culmination of the fire and water never came. Our preparations took place on the stage of the theater and the broadcasts to the whole world. In the end, I had a huge book in my hand that I had to use to say everything, but I didn't know what to do. Then I was sitting in the theater for someone to come up and explain what I had to do, and then I had to go on stage. Not on game, but the fact that I had to shoot on the whole traffic and in sacrificing myself. And in continuation, he has a dream with the landscape, which it says that there was again saving the world, and in this dream there was a myself. Yes, and they exchange brains. So the landscape got everything, Putin got the landscape right, and I got Putin. And she was happy with the dream. And she tried to keep Putin, stayed while Zelensky is saving the world. So she was worried that Zelensky would have a lot of power to save it. Yeah. And I few minutes about these anime dreams. They are also full of there is the university activity. This is the University of St. Petersburg, and they started to collect dreams since the war started. And they have thousands of dreams. They have even Telegram channel which is called Nauka Sna, the Science of Dream, and they have these kind of unknown dreamers reporting on Telegram. You can just go and read them. They put them every day, kind of a new dream. And in many of these dreams, you have a lot of kind of these ethnographic folk images, like, you know, the water, the flooding, the trees, and everything. This is funny. So she dreams as if she's on the International Olympiad in Linguistics in New York. And then one student, after the speech, one student in the audience raises his hand and asks, what is this? Well, to ask how, in my opinion, what was happening affected linguistics and Olympians. What was happening? And I understand that he wants to know my position. He doesn't say what position. But I decided not to tell the whole audience that I'm against, and she doesn't say what. Against it, just, you know, and say that I will answer all similar questions in the corridor after the lecture. And so in that dream, she kind of expressed this anticipated situation in Russian society now, that you cannot really report a lot of things. So they come probably through dreams that she cannot really express that she's against, but against what she doesn't even say. Yeah. They have zombies in their dreams, in the Russian case, and pigs falling out. It's also about that. So they have plenty of deaths in dreams. Yeah, there was it's also was about the boyfriend. So she used to live with some male who was harassing her, and even in a dream, he was yelling at her, and she screamed, "I'd rather be in the world with zombies than we save his youth." And it's also a combination of these war dreams and personal dreams. But just why I wanted to show you these Russian dreams, because in the Ukrainian case, we are so afraid of them, we don't even look at that side, and even if you know what happens there. And dreams sometimes, but maybe such projects will be the possibilities to look into what was happening in Russian Federation in this period. So, in conclusion, we developed a few phases that we have different approaches to collecting materials: diaries, dreams as interviews, dreams as recollection, dreams as questionnaires, where nightlife is here. Each method showed different findings. We have these imagined texts in diaries, recalled in online questionnaires, and recorded texts which were written or made through media. We see a lot of correlations with external events, which is nothing special. Now we have some glimpses into nightlife practices. Some dreams are very therapeutic, let's say. So I can even now differentiate like these dreams which are very therapeutic. And yeah, we have big variety of dreams, from like short messages, like Oksana called them like these non-narrative dreams, and then narrative dreams, and we have also a whole section of dreams from the past that people dream with them in their life. So that's it, and sorry that it took so long, but we
Thank you, Bogdan. It's quite diversity. I think you should start. I think we could just start with
so Emily, even though I know nothing basically psychotherapy or psychoanalysis, set some general thoughts. But my pleasure is to introduce our speaker for this last session, and not to make a mistake and looking for that reason in this slide. Though I know that this was some time. And this works at the Dreamy Center for Victims of Political Persecution and Torture. This located here in Paris, and also she is practicing psychoanalysis privately. Well, this is helping for a certain period of time the Ukrainian hospital Unbroken, which is located in the city that we are coming from. And this, since this is far from the front line, there's a possibility to help people who went through traumatic experiences, who lost their hands or close ones or legs and so on. The Beatrice helps with this, and she's a member of training analyst at the Lacanian School of Psychoanalysis. Since she started in Berkeley, California, and she keeps this contact for many years. And probably I'm not going to deep for this description. You can read about this, but the idea of this final session with Beatrice is to talk about these unspeakable experiences that people have, and which appear through the analysis of therapy. And after this session, we will have a general discussion and maybe some concluding conversation about what can be done with dreams in these turbulent times. So that at least the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Then we will follow you.
Well, thank you for organizing this. All of you are participating in the organization. I think this is a really interesting and enlivening meeting for me, and I think for all of you too. And that I wanted to change a little bit what I'm going to talk about, because so many things were already said. As Bodan said, that my experiences have been working with people who survived political violence and torture from around the world, first in the United States, in San Francisco, and then in Paris. I've done this for 30 plus years. And of course, during this time, listening to a lot of dreams and nightmares and traumatic dreams, and could speak about that, but I actually don't want to speak about this today, because I'm interested in more of the other side of those people like myself, and you also in other functions who receive these like nightmares and dreams, and you work with people's as witnesses to some extent. And I think the question sort of came up throughout this workshop, sort of in the margins, with Sharon asking Natalia, why are you interested in women's experience? What is it in you that we're going to do this? And Bodan making this very interesting comment before that we are instruments, but with souls. So I thought it was kind of remarkable observation that how can we bring ourselves into the picture as the ones who receive and work with people who have, for myself, the case, experienced extreme forms of trauma. And how does this affect us? And it is not too long ago that I had the experience of making a dream myself in response to working with a very, very traumatized patient who was more or less psychotic and who could not really speak about his experiences. And then I woke up from this dream with many questions about what this dream was teaching me about my own position in this particular treatment, and what was happening, what was being transferred to my unconscious from the patients. Not only unconscious, but how I was attempting to understand, read, interpret something that in this dream was made obvious to me, but in the longer process also of self-analysis, I would say, or speaking with colleagues about this dream, and in which the feature of anticipation played an important role. So I was thinking of Koselek's work in the dimension of time and dreams, and this possibility. I hesitate to use the word prophetic because it has such a religious connotation. But I mean, obviously, this is a form of, it's an anticipation, let's say. And then I started to do more research on the question of, well, the analyst's dream or therapist's dreams and how do they use them, and found that apart from Freud, who extensively wrote obviously about his own dreams and how he made use of these dreams in kind of quite extraordinary ways, not many analysts at all have written about this. And so I was thinking about this general phenomenon of repression in my own profession, in terms of not, obviously, has to do with the self-disclosure, yes, and that analysts are in general not willing to do this, at least not in the public place. And so the question was also how to do this in a way that it could be not just exhibitionistic, but somewhat useful to create new pathways to think about these dynamics of what we in analysis call transference and countertransference, that has to do in the situation with a patient, with the patient transferred to the situation of analysis or therapy, and onto the person of the analyst, and what is actually being worked through here in this particular case of severe trauma related to political violence. And therefore, I do think that this work with one's own dream has a political dimension in the sense of sharing this with you, and then sharing this with colleagues, and to make us think about different ways of, as I said yesterday, the political dimension of the unconscious, which concerns myself, which concerns my patient, and which in some ways concerns the entire institution in which I work, in which these phenomena took place. So I think it does go beyond this individualistic, nasal, contemplating form of analysis or understanding of analysis that was perhaps in this discussion about Bettelheim and Charlotte Berat, Bettelheim's vision of psychoanalysis, which of course that's a whole other discussion. What Freudian psychoanalysis became in its transportation to the United States. But we're not going to go there today. So I was remembering in this discussion, I was remembering a quote by George Steiner, who, as you know, is a historian, literary critic, and so forth, who has spent quite a bit of time with writings around the Shoah. And he said in his essay in Bluebeard's Castle, he said, quote, "The material of the Holocaust exercises a subtle corrupting fascination. Bending too fixedly over hideousness, one feels queerly drawn. In some strange way, the horror flatters attention. It gives one's own limited means a spurious resonance. I'm not sure," he says, "whether anyone, however scrupulous, who spends time and imaginative resources on these dark places can, or indeed ought, to leave them intact." So this raises the question, obviously, for your fields as historians, since he speaks of as a well, in some ways, literary historian. How are we affected by what we work with? And of course, since we're all here together, we're interested in those nocturne, dark places, right? And so I think we have this common object that why are we here? Everyone has their own, I assume, very personal reason why they're here, including myself. So we are affected, and I think for you as for me, even though we work in different fields and in different contexts, our way of being affected does influence the work we do. And I think does also influence what we get as responses from the people we interview, for example. I mean, every question is in some ways directed. And the result will be, on some level, a response to the direction of the interview. Now, in my field, obviously, as you know, or may not know, that there was and still is a great debate about the animal's supposed neutrality, the importance of the animal's neutrality. And of course, we see now in this field of trauma therapies that have been mushrooming in the last couple or 3 decades, that the therapist's neutrality is actually no longer such a coveted attitude, and that the call is for analysts or therapists to be empathic and to express to the patient on some level what they feel. Only the problem with that is that the therapists who, and I think that's of course a heavy bias, I think that the therapists who have not been through their own analysis, and even if one has been through one's own analysis, we all have to go back there, that to get too involved emotionally and with our patients has actually very detrimental effects on these therapists, and the rate of burnout in the field of trauma work is extremely high. So people are too affected and they can't really, don't know how to protect themselves. So this is a tricky question of how actually to find a position that is at the same time open and at the least biased as possible, and yet also with a very kind of firm anchoring in one's own place where one stands. And so what I'm going to present to you, this work with the patient, has to do with that precisely. So what kind of place, what kind of position can the analyst dwell in while doing the work? How is this position being taken up by someone who certainly in this case transcends the quote unquote normal parameters of a therapy? And what then do we do with this? Speaks true he who speaks shadows. Quote from Paul Celan. Wahr spricht, wer Schatten spricht. That one dreams so many crazy things doesn't surprise me. That's a quote from Christoph Lichtenberg from 1770. What does surprise me is that one believes oneself to be the one who does and thinks all these things. According to Freud, the dream represents the royal road to the unconscious. In his view, it represents the fulfillment of a desire, if only the desire to sleep. In traumatic dreams or nightmares, which unlike dreams, insist on repeating the same scenario that always gets cut off at the same point, where the dreamer, drenched in anguish, wakes up the desire to sleep is short-circuited. Almost all our patients at the Primo Levi Center suffer from more or less incapacitating forms of insomnia. Not sleeping so as to protect themselves from what could happen and be worse during the night than during the day. That is, these nightmares that return the dreamer to that fear, that terrifying shaking of the body, and that feeling of utter powerlessness, which lie all together at the heart of the traumatic scene. If this is a man, Primo Levi recounts a scathing sequence that is emblematic for survival. First, the recurring nightmare he had in Auschwitz. He returns to the house where he was born, where in the company of his family, he experiences the quote, intense, physical, inexpressible pleasure of being at home, having so many things to tell. End of quote. But this hallucinatory satisfaction of longing for a reunion, to find himself at last welcomed by his family and loved ones who would finally listen to his distress, is soon cut short. It's a lost cause, he says. No one listens to him. Family and friends are indifferent and talk, quote, as if I wasn't there. His sister gets up and leaves without a word. Primo Levi says he is at that moment overcome by total desolation, pure pain, the pain of children who cry. Upon this he wakes up, terrorized. He then tries to shake off his sleep, to open his eyes despite the anguish that overwhelms him, with the impression that, quote, my dream is there in front of me, still warm. After emerging a little more, he remembers that he has already had this dream countless times since his arrival at the camp, that he's already told it to his friend, that his fellow inmates have had exactly the same one. He then tries to, quote, get rid of the shreds of anguish left by the dream so that he can go back to sleep. I crouch down in the dark, he says, look around and put my ear to the ground. You can hear the sleepers breathing and snoring. Some moan and talk. Many smack their lips and wiggle their jaws. They dream they're eating. That too is a collective dream. It's a ruthless dream. Whoever created the myth of Tantalus should have known something about it. Not only do we see the food, we feel it in our hands, distinct and concrete. We perceive its rich, violent smell. Someone brings it to our mouths, but some circumstance, each time different, interrupts the gesture. Then our dream vanishes, decomposes into each of its elements, only to take shape again immediately afterwards, similar and different. And this without a break, for each of us every night and throughout our sleep. End of quote. This last dream, Tantalus dream, as we call it, and we heard about it yesterday, is emblematic in itself for what our patients at the center may evoke in a session, and which inevitably traverses us analysts and affects us. Transposed into our patients' own language, this dream would evoke their sleepless nights in cramped living quarters, where in bare promiscuity the sleep of the ones is haunted by the monsters of the others, and where sometimes an intense enjoyment, like a chimera, may appear in the dark, only to disappear just as quickly, leaving the dreamer distraught, alone, in the face of this hallucinated human being, this Nebenmensch, as Lord would say, who could help, but who, on the contrary, withdraws and disappears, only to shatter all hope toward any other human. The intense fear of not being able to convey to others what is real for them, the repetition of the unspeakable trauma that insists in their nightmares, is also a recurrent concern for our patients. the order to speak concisely, logically, in detail, coherently, and chronologically about their disjointed, chaotic, senseless, traumatic history, in order to create in the asylum officer the intimate conviction, quote unquote, of the reality of the persecution they suffered and those credible fears they have in the event of a forced return to the country. That is today the injunction that the Office for Refugee Protection and Asylum places on political asylum seekers. And dreaming of not being able to convince those who listen to their slides, which means reliving in their own skin Primo Levi's traumatic dream, represents today the darkest nightmare that haunts almost all of our patients. Not being believed by the judges, one of them told me once, is worse than having been tortured. Until not too long ago, suffering from nightmares and being exhausted by insomnia, anxiety, flashbacks, and other symptoms of the so-called post-traumatic stress disorder was a favorable condition for obtaining, if not political refugee status, then at least a temporary residence permit with a provision to receive health care. Today, however, the psychopathology and symptoms of PTSD no longer convince the doctor for the French Immigration Office, who nowadays carry out the medical assessments of asylum seekers under the authority of the Ministry of the Interior. The card entitling to care has become a matter of national security and no longer of health. 2/3 of political asylum seekers are considered non-credible and have their rights denied. 1/4 of the patients received at the Primo Levi Center in 2022 were refused asylum. The Immigration Office argues without hesitation that, quote, the problem of the reality, here the veracity of the alleged condition arises particularly when the diagnosis is based essentially on declarative elements. The problem of the reality of the alleged condition of having been traumatized by political violence and torture arises particularly when the diagnosis is based essentially on declarative elements. Clearly, words are no longer enough to attest to the ills and the suffering. These days, post-traumatic psychopathology, among them nightmares, no longer have any legal incidence or validity. Consequently, the patients who are affected but can't convince the authorities become immediately deportable from French territory. Primo Levi. At that moment, he said, our dream fades away, decomposes into each of its elements, only to take shape again immediately afterwards, similar and yet different. And this goes on without a break for each of us every night and throughout our sleep. End of quote. It therefore seems that today, in order to meet the criteria of reality equals truth equals proof acceptable to the Immigration Office, the nightmare must also take on the body, get inscribed in the real of the body of the asylum seeker, in order to convince the administrators of the reality of the traumatic condition. This aporia confronts us again and again at the Primo Levi Center. Today, from my position as psychoanalyst, I can no longer fail to hear the nightmares and their physical manifestations as an exclusive traumatic symptom that would condense the effects of the patient's physical and psychical violations or drive or impulse-related conflicts, as if these symptoms were dissociated or dissociable from the legal political context in which these symptoms are being produced. So we can come to think that the excessive jouissance on the patient's side, certainly characteristic of extreme trauma, does get intensified by the asylum office's implicit injunction to produce symptoms beyond the so-called declarative elements, since these are considered non-credible, in the realm situated beyond language, which is the real of the body. I had to realize, in spite of myself, that this knotting of a patient's singular traumatic problematic with the perverse effects of asylum policy affects my position as analyst in a way that reminds me of Freud's warnings about the risky practice of analysis, where the analyst considers himself to be, quote unquote, scorched by the fire of transference love. Lacan put this a little bit differently, and he says, in analysis, the analyst is as much at stake as the analysand. The analyst must pay with words, no doubt, but also with his person, insofar as he lends himself as support to the singular phenomenon of the transference. The analyst must pay with what is essential to his most intimate judgment, quote from Lacan, and involve himself in an action that goes to the heart of being. The Kern unseres Wesens, said Freud. This does not mean, of course, that the analyst should take his affective reactions or other burning feelings towards his patient at face value. Contrary to the way some practitioners of intersubjectivity sometimes interpret their countertransference. I'd like to make a distinction here between what is imaginary and what is part of the analyst's unconscious response. If in what follows I use the analyst's dream as an element of transference that resonates with the patient's unconscious, I'm following Lacan, who saw the analyst's unconscious as, quote, the body of a violin whose strings he knows how to play, therefore in resonance with the unconscious of the patient. The question that arises in the following clinical case is how the analyst, myself, when the patient's traumatic response comes to be excessive while he remains without access to speech, can decode and use a formation of his own unconscious, in this case, a dream, to advance the clinical work that is now informed by this knowledge drawn from his self-analysis or from consultations with fellow analysts. So here's the clinical situation. The patient, Mamadou F., an African from an ethnic group persecuted in his own country, initially strikes me by two features: his intense, very obscure gaze, his staring into space as though he was transfixed by another gaze emanating from a dark presence that seemed to be staring back at him. Then, notably, the weakened tonus of his body that he can barely keep upright. He slumps back in his chair as though in free fall, while remaining glued to his gaze, petrified by a dark presence. Mamadou F., a political activist, was imprisoned and brutally tortured. He managed to escape via Libya, where he had been sold and conscripted into forced labor. Finally, he was able to embark on a boat setting off into the Mediterranean Sea, bound for Europe. The first sessions with Mamadou F. were very turbulent. Instead of talking, he started rolling up his pants to show me his scars. I tell him gently but firmly that his words are convincing enough to me that I don't need to see in order to believe him. But he's already plunged back to the terror he must have experienced in his prison cell, trembling, telling me in detail about the torturer's moves across his body. I managed to evade his gaze, by which he tries to fixate me, as if to make me feel what it was like to be locked, unable to withdraw from the all-powerful gaze of someone who was, as suspected, his torturer. But then, once I'd gotten up from my seat and placed myself next to him, speaking to him softly without looking at him, he calmed down. To cut a very long story short, Mamadou F's case is an extreme example of what I could call a borderland clinic, where the analyst has to be inventive when grappling with the excessive results conveyed by the repetition of trauma. Every time this patient invokes the violence that was inflicted on his body, he plunges back into the traumatic scene, as well as into his nightmares, which he can't describe other than by acting them out, gesticulating in front of me. Despite the extreme traumatic charge, he manages to make me understand very quickly that the space of individual sessions, often collapsed by him with the space of the prison cell, must, in order to lose their persecutory character, be connected with other therapeutic spaces, as well as with the other caregivers, or women, whom he has successfully put in touch and connected with each other to form a permanent link or container around himself, despite major administrative obstacles. At first, Mamadou F. succeeded in doing the impossible, emerging from the Freudian Hilflosigkeit, the distress of radical helplessness, and staying in touch with those who, like his deceased mother and grandmother, had always listened to him and helped him when he was in distress. After several very turbulent months, punctuated by delusional crises that prompted emergency hospitalizations, I had a dream that surprised, startled, and challenged me. I'd never made a dream about a patient of mine, or at least I'd never recalled a dream about a patient of mine. In the dream, which I remember upon waking, and which I transcribed with a few words in German, my mother tongue. So I have to say, of course, I transcribed the dream in French with a few words in German, and now I translated the whole thing into English. So it's confusing. In the dream, I jump into the water, into a sea where I'm immediately sucked down to the bottom. This water has a very peculiar texture. It is too diluted or thin, too dun, to swim in. In contrast,